Hey guys. Here's part 9 and finale of What If Naruto Was a Mokuton User. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 25, Deception. Are you certain that this is the right choice? Inoichi couldn't help but wonder if the trust he had in his oldest friend hadn't led him astray. His daughter had followed their Hokage, while he had joined the rest of the Konoha's forces. Why? He could argue that he did this because he was the leader of the Yamanaka clan, but if he was honest with himself, he'd rather be with his daughter. Sadly, this was one of those many cases where his duties were outweighing his personal wishes. Do you think we should instead trust a letter sent by a girl who isn't even officially leading her village? Shikaka snorted. No, you know very well that I would not go to war if I could avoid it, Inoichi, but this situation is too perfect an opportunity. Kiri is too divided to interfere, Suna too weak, so who is to stop us from exploiting the war between IWA and Kumo? Those fools started this by themselves. I know that you act under the presumption that there is nothing left that could threaten our village, Inoichi sighed. But what if Tsunade is right? Do you still trust her capabilities? Her temper was always a weak point in her character, but to blatantly disregard the council and rush off with a force of her own, well, she made her decision. She chose to chase ghosts over doing her actual duty, proving that her critics were actually correct. The unusually talkative Nara couldn't muster much respect for the Senju. Her quest showed me that we should reconsider her position. I wonder why she just did not accept that, and persisted with those fantasies that he was kidnapped. After all, there have been multiple witnesses who have seen Naruto leave the battlefield, as well as those who have seen him travel through Hai no Kuni. But why would he have done that? Why? Shikaku turned to look at his friend. He already stated clearly enough that he didn't particularly care about our village anymore. All we need is for him to keep out of this. For too long, we have suffered the equilibrium between villages. For too long, our shinobi have fought and died for nothing. Today, we have a chance to shatter that equilibrium. Two villages are at each other's throats, weakening each other. Who is to stop us from swooping in and taking out two of our competitors? It is logical. Inoichi spoke the last word as if it were dirty. The logical thing to do, for sure, but is it right? What is right or wrong is determined by the victors, the Nara shrugged. Morality and ethics are subject to cultural influences and personal opinions. They aren't somehow magically fixed entities. And even if it is wrong, who cares? It will be decided by history, and those who are victorious write that history. You would go through with this plan despite knowing that it is wrong? There are too many grudges between our villages. Even if that greenhorn who thinks herself to be a Kaguya believes that peace is as easily attained as just offering it to the others, the both of us know that there are too many grudges on both sides to ever accommodate a lasting peace. And do I need to mention that we have a shot at ending Kumogaku's greed? They have been hoarding power for decades, just ask Hayashi about that. Do you want them to snatch away your daughter, Inoichi? The only feasible path to a lasting peace is for us to eliminate our competitors. An idealist might say that we should give IWA the benefit of the doubt, but a realist would know that my words are true. Now is the time for Konoha to rise to dominance, and to put an end to this long struggle for power. Tell me, does that make me evil? Shikaku questioned. Even if it does, in my opinion it is worse to waste the opportunity we have been presented. If we act now, our children and all the generations to come do not have to suffer the pointless bloodshed we have experienced. For that, I gladly become a villain. Yamanaka Inoichi remained silent, not knowing what to say. Was Tsunade right, with her faith in Kuratsuchi? A lot would depend on how trustworthy that girl's promise was. Did she have enough sway over her village and her council to actually back up her words? The fact that she wasn't yet the official Tsuchikage spoke against her. Meanwhile, the good judgment of Tsunade was also something that could be put to discussion. Inoichi knew better than most, even if his daughter was rather tight-lipped about the matter, that the Senju was emotionally fragile. What should I say? Should I join the others, and participate in a war that brings peace, or should I try to advocate for peace, knowing that this choice would most likely lead to more wars in the future? Inoichi looked at his friend. The Nara was going over the strategic map, revisiting his plans with the latest intel provided by the Censor Division. Is it evil to sacrifice a few for the good of the many? Is it worse to act self-righteously, knowing that I would condemn many more to die in inevitable future conflicts if I refused to dirty my own hands? This choice seems to be between the lesser of two evils. The whole thing was a mess, really. The tree, one of the most recognizable aspects of the village, was gone, while the village itself, all that was left was ruins. When he had first visited Takigakure, along with Kakuzu, the village was already not the most prosperous. Not that the village radiated an aura of poverty or anything, but the differences between a major village and a small one such as Taki were clearly visible. Of course, once Kakuzu had left the place, dragged away by Naruto, Takigakure had already been scarred. Right now, there wasn't a scarred village anymore. The battle had transformed the place into a crater, an ugly scar on the landscape. The Jubi, unable to break free, kept thrashing around. As a testament to its power, its tails destroyed the mountains surrounding the former village as if they were made out of cardboard. More than one white Zetsu was caught in the destruction, flattened by boulders that were tumbling down. Of course, those cowardly clones didn't dare to come close anymore. If they came too close to his chakra, Naruto knew what would happen to them. Especially now that Kurama was complete, his chakra was so full of life. Kurama's words, not his, that Zetsu would lose his consistency and turn into a tree. Kinda makes you wonder what those bastards are made of, he idly groused, while scanning the battlefield. Kurama was nervous, as the Jubi should have been able to put up more of a fight. Naruto agreed with the cunning fox, knowing all too well that it was wise to heed the fox's warnings. Things were definitely going too smoothly. The assembly of shinobi, in which Naruto saw Hittite from both Konoha and Aim, was circling around the Jubi, firing jutsu after jutsu while his dragons kept sapping chakra from the creature. Still, even though he had recharged Sage Mode, Naruto could not sense the Jubi weakening at all. The logical conclusion would be that it was waiting for something. But for what did it wait? The white Zetsu clones were incapable of doing anything, and each of Akatsuki's members had perished. All except Black Zetsu. It irked him that he couldn't detect Black Zetsu. Standing atop his strongest jutsu, the Jutsuman Kannon, Naruto kept a close eye on all the players left on the field. Could it be that Konan betrays us? He wondered. No, the woman was leading the Aim Nin, and was attacking the Jubi with everything she had. On the other side of the Jubi, Tsunade was leading the Konoha Nin. She, too, seemed to be at his side. What other players were left that could change the game? Mado Guy? Nay, his taijutsu is impressive, but he's just a jonin. He's not the type to side with the Jubi, Naruto scowled. No, there was but one person with the potential to change the battlefield at this point. And she would never side against him. Naruto was willing to lay down his life for that. That means there's only one option left, Kurama growled angrily. Ironically, he did so at the very moment that Naruto detected Black Zetsu's presence. If he hadn't been looking in the right direction, he doubted if he could have sensed the stealthy bastard at all. But luck was at his side for once. I can make it. I gotta improvise. Senpo, Kawarimi no Jutsu. Naruto simply combined two jutsu, mashing them together on the fly. Ajisai was encased in wood, and she and Naruto substituted. It was nothing like the regular body replacement technique, but he had to improvise. Me, Naruto smirked when he saw Black Zetsu's startled expression. He stomped one foot on the ground, forcing his chakra through the earth. He wouldn't allow the evasive Zetsu to escape once more. Especially not after he dared to target Aji-chan. Do you truly think you can stop the inevitable? Black Zetsu looked down, obviously noticing that Naruto had tried to cut off his escape route. Watch me, the Jinchuriki glared back. Senpo Mokuton, Kannon Ryot, Sage Art would release, Cannon's hands. A replica of the left hand of the cannon shot from the ground, its speed surprising Zetsu, who completely failed to dodge. Before Zetsu fully processed what Naruto had done, the hand held his legs, its thorns piercing Zetsu's black flesh. You really are an unexpectedly great annoyance, Zetsu grunted, ignoring the pain he felt. But I have lived for centuries. Did you think that I would go down easily? You'll die, no matter how you'll try to squirm your way out of this one. The Jubi will grow. The tree will rise. And then the day of reckoning is upon your species. You dared to impede my exalted mother, and here I thought that your white half was the insane one, Naruto spat. Just hurry up and die already, you backstabbing piece of shit. It took much effort to get the Mizukage and Reikage to cooperate, but once I made sure the Hokage wouldn't do a thing to stop them, it was fun to destroy your clan, Uzumaki Naruto. Black Zetsu laughed. Naruto was starting to think that the parasitic creature had completely lost it, except for the fact that the fall of the Uzumaki clan sounded exactly like one of Zetsu's schemes and the Hokage had, willingly or not, played a part in that. The wooden hand of the cannon clenched, crushing Zetsu's legs. This didn't really accomplish much, considering how Black Zetsu had a rather fluid body, but it felt satisfactory nonetheless. Fuin, Zetsu still chuckled. How delightful that you will be destroyed by the jutsu your ancestors guarded with their lives. Naruto choked and nearly lost his balance when something oppressive connected to his body. He heard Kurama scream warnings, but could only watch with a morbid fascination at the intricate pattern that appeared underneath his feet. Now it made sense to him why Black Zetsu had disappeared for a while. He had been preparing this, and targeted Ajisai to seal. To seal what? The Jubi? Kurama cried out in panic. Stop that bastard! He's sealing the Jubi in you. I would, if I could, Naruto stammered. I can't move. His eyes turned to the Jubi, which had suddenly stopped resisting its binds. Its enormous eye focused upon the blonde Jinchuriki. But Naruto could not really keep his attention on what the Jubi did. He looked at his Moku Bunshin, and to Ajisai, disoriented, at its side. The rough jutsu he had used to get her to safety had apparently not gone without a hitch. Wordlessly, Naruto nodded at his clone, ordering it to move back and take Ajisai away. I might die today, but the tree will bloom, and your world will be rent asunder. Zetsu shouted with the last of his power. The chakra injected from the left hand of the cannon had spread, blossoming into a lethal poison, and after centuries of scheming, Zetsu's quest had finally come to a close. The parasitic entity died with a smile. Knowing that he had succeeded, he had fulfilled his purpose. Naruto stumbled. All things faded from his sight. Sounds were silenced. Lights were dimmed. Smells evaporated. Only the chill of the Jubi's endless chakra crept through his body. With it, a voice came. It was a voice, so sweet and soothing, enticing yet commanding without tolerating any disobedience, a voice which commanded him to do something. Something. What was he doing? What was she saying? Why was he listening to her? Something left his body. Something grew higher than any tree he had ever spawned. Its roots went deeper than anything he had ever felt. It was everywhere. He was everywhere. The world suddenly felt so small. So fragile. They weren't caught in the genjutsu, as they should be, but it mattered little to him, to her. The sequence was of little importance now. All she needed was to reclaim what was hers. Hers? Shin, Jukai Koten, God, nativity of a world of trees, he heard himself say, repeating what that female voice whispered him to say. Then, what little was left of his consciousness was dragged inside. The alluring voice drew him closer and closer. She had made fun of him. She had ridiculed him in whatever way she could get away with that he let her get away with. She teasing him, while he grumpily played his own part in their usual play. It had been how she had imagined herself to be doing this, for him to be there, at her side, giving her the guidance he had always given, the guidance she desperately needed, the guidance that she had always taken for granted. Regret, that was what she felt most during these days. It had numbed her heart, even if her mind was straining to cope with an overwhelming amount of information that she had to process, and decisions she had to make. She had always made fun of him when he made a fuss when nothing was going on, when nothing seemed to be going on. Only now, she realized that he had put so much effort into his duties in order to keep it like that, to maintain that facade, in order for the rest of the village to only have to worry about trivialities. For decades, he had ensured that a Wagakure no Sato endured, and now that task had fallen to her. It pained Kuratsuchi to admit that she was not ready for such a daunting task. There was just too much going on, all at the same time, for her to maintain her usually calm and easygoing demeanor. She was tired, cranky, and mourning. She was mourning the death of her grandfather, slain by the treacherous Reikage, but also the death of her father Kitsuchi. Those self-righteous fools of Kumogakure actually had declared war upon Iwagakure. The very moment the war against Amigakure had ended, the very moment the word had spread that the Tsuchikage and Reikage had fallen in battle, the forces from Kumo had marched to their borders. The shinobi from Iwagakure had valiantly defended the borders, but although they fought on their own familiar grounds, they were at a disadvantage from the very start. Kumo's forces had been scattered over the nations, cleaning out the Akatsuki hideouts, but they had lost relatively few. Iwagakure, on the other hand, had participated in a battle where many had met their untimely ends. Due to the trickery of Zetsu and the betrayal of the Reikage and his jonin, Kuratsuchi had lost many good men and women who could have given her the edge over the invading army. Instead, they had found themselves outnumbered and outmatched, fighting and retreating each day. It was a war in the trenches, quite literally, as they made Kumo fight for every inch of ground, and it had brought only misery to both sides. So many had died, and why? If anyone should have been outraged, it was them, not Kumo, as the Reikage had slain their Tsuchikage. I wish Gramps was still here, Kuratsuchi thought wistfully. He would know what to do, even in this mess. Then again, I doubt he would have approved of the letter I sent to Konoha. he would never have asked for an alliance. She firmly believed that Ryotenda no Inoki would have found some way to avoid this mess, and if it had happened anyway, he would have put on a show and disintegrated a few squads. A good scare would have changed the minds of Kyumo's shinobi. After all, what kind of idiot would willingly face someone with the Jintan Kekkei Toda? Yes, Kuratsuchi, acting Tsuchikage during this invasion, wanted her grandpa to still be alive. She wanted her father to be at her side too, grumpy and annoying as he could be. She wanted rest. I'm too tired. I should get some sleep, but how can I rest while all these men and women are risking their lives out there? They're depending on me to find a way out of this mess, she sighed deeply. Her eyes were drawn to the map, where the current status of the battlefield was drawn. How long could they maintain this, before the Kyumo Nin would reach the village? How long would these invaders be able to keep pushing them back? Surely they would have to get exhausted at some point as well, right? A large figure rushed into her tent. Before she recognized his chakra, she saw his silhouette. It was the shield of the Tsuchikage, Akatsuchi, one of the best jonin left in her army. And rather than wearing the grim expression he had shown during their attempt to thwart the invasion, he was now actually smiling. It was a tired and, literally, dirty smile, as if he had rushed straight from the front lines to here, still covered in dust and blood. They're here. Who is? They've used the setting sun, and whatever else they could, to hide their approach. Now they are rushing towards the left flank, Akatsuchi continued, ignoring her question. They should be hitting Kyumo's forces as we speak. I might not be the Tsuchikage officially, but I'd like it if you at least answered my questions. Kuratsuchi tried to resist the urge to lash out against him. She was too tired and too worried to have an excess of patience. Konoha, why didn't you say so immediately? She snapped, rushing out of the tent. To her elation, she saw chaos spread through the ranks of the Kyumogakure shinobi. Squads of Konoha Nin were surgically striking key points in the Kyumo army. She had gotten a reply only 1 hour ago, stating that Konoha would send reinforcements, so either the messenger hawk had been slow, or the message had been sent late. Anyway, Kuratsuchi was relieved to see that they had answered her request. Well, it was a plea, and she knew it. An explosion caught her attention. It was too close. What the? Her eyes widened. The Konoha Nin had split into 2 large groups, one striking the Kyumo forces, while the other half descended upon her own shinobi. Traitors! She cried out. You filthy, hypocritical, backstabbing traitors! Akatsuchi could not recall ever having seen the young woman this angry. While she was usually easygoing, she had been particularly angry when Deidara had defected. But that was nothing like this. Right now, she looked as if she could exterminate the whole lot of their enemies with one glare. Kuratsuchi-sama, he instinctively used the honorific he never used for her before. We should call everyone back and organize our. The ground started to tremble, and suddenly a wave of strange chakra pulsed through the area. Some men stumbled and fell, spouting trees from their bodies as they died. This occurred within her own ranks, but she saw the same confusion within the Kyumo and Konoha ranks just as well. Although she did not know, and could not see it, Shikaku was shocked to see his cousin undergo the same fate. He, however, quickly connected the facts, and paled. This was what had happened to the white Zetsu clones that had gotten too close to Naruto. This meant that that pulse of chakra originated from the Jinchuriki as well. Worse was the fact that it showed how Zetsu had infiltrated their ranks. This particular cousin, Shikaku remembered, was the person who had provided the information that had convinced him that Naruto had merely defected, rather than being abducted like Tsunade had claimed. Across the field, the Kyumo Nin saw several of their men and women turn into trees, although none realized that these had all been particularly vocal supporters of this invasion. Unlike Shikaku, they did not realize that they had been manipulated. Granted, none were given the time to process the events properly. There weren't many strategists in the world that could outthink Nara, and Shikaku was the best of his clan for a reason. Not even Shikaku could have foreseen what was coming now, though. The earth stopped trembling. Enormous tree roots shot up, tearing open the soil. The attack was as sudden as it was devastating, and before Kuratsuchi could do as much as blink, many of the gathered shinobi had fallen victim to whatever jutsu it was that Naruto had cast. What Kuratsuchi did notice, however, was that the attack was completely indiscriminate. Akatsuchi protected her as well as he could, but there were too many. Everywhere roots shot up, entangling people, trapping them into cocoon-like shells. It wasn't until she fell victim to the jutsu herself that she understood why those who were captured in those cocoons did not break free. Even if they were not caught in any genjutsu, Jukai Koten was more than capable of subduing every living thing. Surely, it was more difficult to drain the targets of their chakra, and they would not be transformed into the loyal minions that the Zetsu were, but the jutsu did what it was supposed to do nonetheless. All over the world, the same thing happened. A pulse of chakra affected every white Zetsu in the world, causing the instant extermination of their kind. Each and every clone was hit, causing them to destabilize and sprout out as trees. All over the world, there were those who saw their friends, family, and loved ones change. Leaders saw their most trusted advisors turn into trees. Generals lost their best messengers. All throughout the social systems of mankind, there were many important, yet unimposing, positions who had turned out to be spies. Such was the extent of Zetsu's infiltration. Not just Iwa, Kumo, and Konoha were thrown in confusion, but Kirigakure and Sunagakure were affected as well. Temari had been in the middle of a heated debate with her village's counselors when two of the elders suddenly turned into trees. Unknown to her, the impersonator of the daimyo of Kaze no Kuni, the only daimyo that had been successfully replaced by Zetsu, perished as well. In Mizu no Kuni, the time for debates had already been past. The grudges and disagreements had grown out of control in the typical way for their nation, as the people were too hot-headed and vengeful for their own good. No matter how Terumi had exerted herself, a civil war had proven to be unavoidable. However, aside from some early skirmishes, both sides were still regrouping and strategizing. The loyalists, who still believed in Yagura's doctrine, were outnumbered but knew that this did not mean much, as the rebels, who now ruled Kirigakure, had been victorious from their underdog position. Imagine the surprise when men and women on both sides suddenly turned into trees. Both sides briefly accused the other of this act, before the branches of the Shinju rose from the earth and gathered all over the world. People tried to resist, tried to escape the inevitable, before they were caught. Some lasted longer, like Mei or Temari, while others were caught before they even realized what happened. Zetsu had done his work well, and in each army and group there was division and discontent. Distrust prevented allies from properly fighting side by side, which might have given them a slight chance at victory. Against Naruto's mastery of the Mokuton Kekkei Genkai, however, all struggles soon proved to be futile. Sunagakure, weakened to the point that it was afraid and defensive, fell. Kirigakure, torn in civil war, fell. Kumogakure, with the majority of its shinobi misguidedly invading another nation, fell. Iwagakure, already struggling to defend itself, fell. Even Konoha stood no chance. All fell before the might of the Shinju, all failed against the skill of Uzumaki Naruto. Only one remained, the last conscious and free human being, one who had seen all her friends and allies being caught by Naruto's onslaught. Ajisai. She, with her Rinnegan, had seen it happen. Naruto's clone had spent all of its chakra using the Juchiman Kanon to protect her, and after it fell she was forced to rely on her own powers. Shinra Tensei was useful, without a doubt, and one of the strongest jutsu that existed, but the second she needed to wait after each usage was a glaring weakness. Why had this happened? Ajisai had seen black Zetsu rise from the ground, seemingly targeting her, and then she had been moved to the top of Naruto's enormous wooden Buddha-like statue. Then all hell had broken loose. A truly enormous tree had risen up, one which put even Takigakure's old tree, the one which the Jubi had somehow consumed, in its shadow. The burst of chakra that came from Naruto right after that had blinded her for a moment, showing the downside of a dojutsu that could see chakra. Never before had she seen a chakra signature as potent as his. Naruto had always been extremely powerful, and was even more so since she had reunited the two halves of the Kyuubi. But right now his power was simply absurd. With her summons at her side, Ajisai slowly worked her way through the onslaught of tree roots that all tried to ensnare her in a cocoon, like the tree had done to all others she had seen. Tsunade, Konan, Swearin, Ino, she could not see any of them anymore, not even the toads. Every cocoon looked the same to her, the tree's chakra completely masking the signature of those within. I can't keep this up all alone. Ajisai didn't fail to notice that her own chakra reserves were slowly dwindling. Besides, to properly act, she needed to know what this jutsu was, what it was supposed to do to its victims. All she had seen was an enormous tree filled with an ominous energy, while its roots gathered all the shinobi that were nearby. Perhaps if I know the purpose of the jutsu, I can find a weakness in it. And if I can free people from it, they would be able to help me out. Alas, it was easier thought than done. Getting near those cocoons meant that she had to get closer to the thicker roots to which the cocoons were attached. Getting closer to those roots meant that the attacks intensified. Still, she had to take a risk. Playing it safe in this already desperate situation was no option anyway. What she found was that the cocoons were surprisingly easy to break from the outside, at least. Those trapped inside, however, seemed completely subdued. She had found a Konoha kunoichi, a jonin by the looks of it, who barely seemed to register Ajisai's attempts to free her. Ajisai could see how the chakra of the tree completely overwhelmed its victim, and if she was not mistaken it had slowly started to drain the kunoichi of her chakra. Ajisai could not tell for what purpose. She was not granted the time to investigate, and lost her summoned panda before she got out of the web of roots that had tried to trap her. Obviously, her actions had drawn attention. Her eyes only caught a hint of a movement before the sound of a crash entered her ears. Naruto, no, someone who looked like Naruto had noticed her. His skin and hair were as pale as white Zetsu, and a strange bone-like thing adorned his forehead. It somewhat resembled a Hittite, only without a symbol. What was even stranger was that two horns grew out of the bone thing. His eyes were closed, yet it did not seem to hinder him in the slightest. Before Ajisai even got a proper look at him, he had already planted a foot in her stomach, sending her flying. Ignoring the pain, Ajisai quickly scrambled to her feet. Shinra Tensei, more on instinct than with any conscious thought, she halted his follow-up attack. It did not seem to stop him for long, though. He now wore rough black pants, walked on bare feet, and had his torso covered by some sort of white robe. This robe had 6 black Magatama markings across the chest and 9 black Magatama markings in 3 rows of 3 on the back. Those symbols were odd, but they weren't what made his current appearance so odd to her. With her eyes, she could see that these clothes were not what they appeared to be. The pants and the robe were constructs of pure chakra. She couldn't tell why he'd create such a chakra cloak, but she could see that it would shield him from practically any jutsu. Naruto-kun, what are you doing? Get back to your senses, please, she pleaded. She didn't understand why he was suddenly doing this. What had Zetsu done to him? Why was his chakra so similar to that of that monstrous tree? Are you, too? His voice was almost mechanical, as if he did not know how to use it. Do you even understand what I'm saying? What did Zetsu do to you? Are you giving up this easily? Ajisai whispered. Don't you even try to resist whatever it is that Zetsu did to you. Naruto raised his arms, perpendicular to his torso, and from his open hands 2 black blobs of chakra emerged. Ajisai tried to look past the empty expression on his face, tried to ignore that he still had not opened his eyes, and looked at those black orbs of chakra instead. It wasn't like she couldn't distinguish a single nature transformation in that chakra, but rather that she saw it all. Doton, Raiton, Futon, Katon, and Suiton, she saw it all being balanced and merged in that black chakra. To any other person, that chakra would have formed a nigh unstoppable attack. Sure, Ajisai was surprised to see one of the black orbs fly at her, as she didn't expect anyone to use a chakra with such density for a ranged attack. But the abilities of Pretapath were always hungry, regardless of what type of chakra it was. The chakra-made robe flickered, destabilizing for a fraction of a second, while Naruto tilted his head. He seemed confused by the sudden disappearance of his attack. The momentary lapse of concentration showed that his chakra wasn't as strong as she initially thought. Well, it was still far too strong, that was obvious, but it was also strangely divided. Conflicted. Sigh, run, he strained to talk. She, close, darkness. As far as his eye could see, there was this endless and despairing darkness. Apart from all this nothingness, the only thing that he could distinguish were the branches that kept him in place. They tied him, bound him in such a way that he could barely move a muscle. The constant pressure of battling the white, gray, and brown branches, which constricted him to the point that they seemed to be intent on tearing him asunder, was threatening to make him lose his sanity. He already was lost, or so he felt. A weariness, a mind-numbing apathy, had taken hold of him. Why was he here? What was he doing? Where would he go? All such questions had seemed important once, yet held so little meaning now. What did it all matter? Everything he did came crashing down in failure anyway. He'd lose whatever he gained, fall whenever he managed to stand up, and it all changed nothing about the world around him. No, he couldn't think like that. Ajisai was alive again. Kurama depended on him. If he lost now, the Jubi would rise, swallowing up the poor fox who'd be condemned to a fate worse than death. Unlike the mortal soul, which would pass on to the Pure Land, Kurama's entire existence would be erased. The creature that he had once been a part of would reclaim him, absorb him until finally all aspects of the personality he had developed over the course of the last centuries. It was irrelevant. Duties, hopes, they were all just burdens, ties that kept him from moving. They were strings that made him a puppet in the hands of others. Everything which he had held important was just as futile as the matters of any other human. He, like any other mortal, was a lesser creature whose only reason to exist was to… Wait, what? Why did he feel like that? It's like there are two voices in my head, battling for dominance, he sighed wearily. He was tired. Caught in the crossfire between both opinions, he felt only his fatigue. He was tired because he had to keep resisting the branches that threatened to tear him apart. What the other two voices wanted, it all seemed so cumbersome, indeed. Resistance is futile. No, do not give up. Think of Ajisai, think of Kurama. What would happen to them? What would happen to Tsunade, to Ino, to everyone? Foolishness. They'd all die eventually. It would be better for them if their deaths were to serve a higher purpose. I am nowhere. There's no escape from here. Not only that, but it's a burden to keep myself together. Why are those two opposing opinions even important to me, if I can't even do a single thing to liberate myself? Naruto groaned when the branches around his right arm tightened and threatened to pull the limb off his torso. And yet, I cannot allow myself to fail. I cannot fail Aji-chan. I cannot condemn Kurama to such a fate. I must endure. Humans have always struggled to delay the inevitable. A female voice came from the darkness that surrounded him. Naruto recognized the voice, as it was the same which had he heard before he ended up in this, whatever this place was supposed to be. Who are you? Naruto growled. Curiosity. Even at the very end, your short-lived race never seems to lose that quality. Unfortunately, that curiosity by far exceeds your capacity to understand. The female voice sounded oddly disappointed. Perhaps that is why they turned against me. You will fail, Jubi. Your resistance is commendable. The voice regained the slightly amused edge it had before she spoke of those who had turned against her. But now it ends. Pride yourself in the fact that you managed to last this long, and rest. Live your dream. Your suffering has lasted long enough, even if it was involuntary. The darkness that followed after her word grabbed a hold of his mind, and he welcomed it. Whether he was truly glad that it ended or not, he could not tell. His heart felt corrupted by the opposing ideals. The pain of the branches tearing at him was irrelevant compared to the feeling he had that his own mind had been invaded. Had he lost this struggle before it had even started? Blinking his eyes, he tried to shut out the annoying light. He stifled a yawn, though failed horribly at doing so. Reorienting himself, he noticed that the sheets were a mess, all sweaty and twisted around him. Obviously, he had been having a bad dream. It was a weird dream, too, although he couldn't really remember what it had been about. The elusive nature of dreams was a rather frustrating fact. Freeing himself from the entangled fabric, he walked towards the mirror. His eyes had grown adjusted to the bright light of the morning sun. His mood had improved a lot, simply due to the many songs of the birds outside. It sounded like spring, and the garden had attracted many birds who all sang their songs. It seemed perfect, and yet, looking in the mirror, his hands absent-mindedly touched the places where he had expected to see scars. Weird. Why should I have scars? Was it that strange dream? He pondered. Turning around, he went to the closet and collected his clothes. They seemed a bit big, but his vantage point had changed too. For some reason his own height confused him. Why would my height confuse me? Things didn't seem logical. All that confusion was eclipsed when a woman entered his bedroom. Naruto-kun, you should get dressed. Yamanaka Ino kissed him. No, she wasn't a Yamanaka anymore. He remembered the day she had taken his name. Breakfast is ready, and you've got to go to your office soon. Stupefied, all he could do was stare at her. Her purple outfit left her midriff exposed, and seemed to be designed to accentuate her chest, an area where she had been very well developed. Motherhood had that effect on people, after all. Wait, what? Don't just stand there, silly, Ino smirked. I know I'm gorgeous, but save that for tonight. She blushed a little. Sakura-chan agreed to have Minato-chan sleeping over. You know how well Minato-chan and Sarada-chan get along. But it leaves the whole night for the two of us. I seem to remember you talking about a second? Yeah, Naruto didn't know why he had been confused. Why would the appearance of his wife confuse him? I'm sure Minato-chan would love a little brother or sister. His smile broadened. I'll make sure I finish the paperwork early. Or else I simply ditch it on Ba-chan. Don't anger Tsunade-sama. Uzumaki Ino stood on her toes and kissed her husband. I can't have you all injured tonight. I want my tiger to be in prime condition. I wouldn't mind getting the nurse treatment again, though, Naruto thought aloud. I'll stop teasing, he chuckled, seeing his wife being uncharacteristically bashful. Obviously she hadn't forgotten about that night either. I'll be down in a second. Good, I'll get Minato-chan out of bed. Although Naruto didn't let her get out of the bedroom without first playfully slapping her well-formed rear. Life is good, Naruto thought happily, finishing dressing himself. All he needed was his cloak, but that was downstairs. Along with the hat. Even after 4 years, he still thought of it as Tsunade's hat. He had married the girl he had grown up with, the woman he had always loved, and together they had their little loose cannon of a son. Uzumaki Minato, named after the boy's famous grandfather, had unfortunately inherited a deadly combination of the energy of his father and the inquisitiveness of his mother. Naruto was looking forward to the time his boy would pick up the noble art of pranking. Yes, life was definitely good, and yet there was something gnawing at him. What? He couldn't tell. Ino wondered why he was so pensive, but he couldn't explain it to her. As he walked to the Hokage's office, he was greeted by countless people. Their hero, their idol, he wondered why they saw him as such. It felt so odd that there were those who practically worshipped the very ground he walked upon, yet so good to know that he was acknowledged by them all. Why am I feeling so detached? Naruto couldn't put his finger on it. Sakura dropped by, giving him the reports of the hospitals she led. Tsunade may have founded it, but she had decided that her pupil was better of leading it. At least, that was what the Senju had claimed. Everyone who knew her a bit better knew that she had simply pawned off the responsibilities so that she could pick up her gambling addiction again. Oh well, at least she stays clear of alcohol now. That one drunken debacle was bad enough. Ino-chan threatening to keep Minato-chan away from her definitely had the desired effect. Naruto chuckled as he looked at the portrait of the former Godame Hokage. Tsunade loved sake, but that affection paled in comparison to the love she felt for what was practically her grandchild. She and Jiraiya definitely were complete suckers when it came to the blonde 3-year-old. Still, when his Jonin commander entered the office, Naruto was overwhelmed by a sense of wrongness. Sai gave it no thought, simply giving his report regarding this week's drills, acting as stoic as ever. While they had enjoyed peace for years now, the pale Jonin commander remained adamant that their forces had to maintain proper discipline. He had always been a bit too serious. At least, until Naruto pointed out that he still had some lipstick on his cheek. The former root operative was easily flustered, making it so funny to tease him. But why was it that the interaction with Sai felt wrong? Once he was alone in his office, Naruto looked down at his hand. A golden ring, practically identical in color to Ino's hair, adorned his finger. Why was I expecting to see a wooden ring? Why can't I feel you? The hunched-down form of Uzumaki Naruto, the Rokudaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, muttered to himself, referring to the tree against which he held his hand. Nothing. He couldn't feel a thing. The complete and utter lack of any sort of sensation coming from the tree made him feel empty. While he had trouble remembering, he knew for certain that there had to be some sort of connection between himself and nature. For weeks since he had had that odd dream, he felt disconnected. When I remembered that ring, I knew I had to feel something. But what? Why do I keep feeling so incomplete? He had woken up, got dressed, ate his breakfast, enjoyed the company of his lovely family, and then went to work. As the Hokage of Konoha, he definitely had a lot of responsibilities, yet his efforts were made fairly easy due to the peace that had been established between the nations. In the absence of wars and larger-scale conflicts, the shinobi had a rather peaceful time. Sure, there were the occasional ragtag groups of bandits or missing nin, but it was nothing they couldn't deal with. In fact, they hadn't lost an active shinobi in over a year. After dealing with the internal politics and paperwork of the village, he'd return home, enjoy dinner, and later, after little Minato was in bed and read his nighttime story, Naruto would turn to his wife. So what was wrong? What was gnawing at him? The world was perfect, his life was perfect, his family was perfect, so why did he feel so empty inside? His eyes suddenly spurred wide open, and his hands went to his stomach. He's gone? Naruto stammered. How? No, wait, he was never there, was he? Shouting out in frustration, he unintentionally uprooted the tree in front of which he stood. Damn it, I really gotta restrain myself. The world made no sense. It was as if he had woken up from a dream so deep that it felt as if he was still numb, and wondering what was real and what was not. So many questions were left unanswered, so many things which had seemed obvious in his dream now seemed, what is this hole inside my head? Why does it feel like I'm lost in some kind of void? The sound of footsteps drew him from his musings. He ignored it, at first, but soon found himself unable to do so. She had let her son down, and he had rushed to his father. What's wrong, Minato-chan? He frowned, seeing the confused expression on his son's face. He's the one who is worried, Naruto-kun. As am I, Ino chimed in. You seem a bit out of it today. Are you really okay? I should be, Naruto answered truthfully. His son had inherited his spiky hair, although with Ino's brand of platinum blonde. Those curious, big, blue eyes seemed to stare into his soul, and they hurt him, Naruto realized. Holding his son so close, yet doubting the reality in which he lived. It hurt. The love he felt for his family tempted him to just accept this all as real, but he couldn't feel the energy of nature itself. Kurama wasn't here. And that ring, something was wrong with his ring. Why did he have a golden wedding ring, when it should have been a smooth, wooden engagement ring? Whatever future I have, it will be shared with you, Aji-chan. His eyes widened when the memory entered his mind. Whatever future. It will be shared with Ajisai. Not Ino, not Minato-chan, but I really wish I could stay, Ino-chan. Naruto tried to ignore the tears that began to run down his cheeks. And Naruto-kun, what are you saying? Ino stammered. You're not. Why would you leave us? Why you can't? There are no lights to guide me home, but still. I need to free myself. Naruto kissed his son, who was affected by his parents' emotions even if the little boy didn't understand what his parents were talking about. I won't let you, Ino began. Ino-chan, Naruto looked away. I wish I didn't need to. This world is perfect. Minato-chan is perfect. You are as perfect as I always imagined you to be. My family, my beloved. I wish I could stay forever. This is all I wish for before I, then stay. But Ino-chan, they all depend on me. Who? No, it doesn't matter, Ino shook her head. We depend on you, Naruto-kun. I depend on you. I know, Naruto hesitated. I know you do, for you are not real. None of you are. What are you saying? Ino now cried openly. Please stop it. You're breaking my heart. You are the world that could have been, had Zetsu not interfered with my life. This is a world where none of my friends have perished. This is a world where I didn't have to struggle with the burden that Kurama once posed. Naruto let down Minato, as the little boy wanted to go to his mommy. You are the dream I had when I was a boy, the perfect world. Naruto sighed, and turned his gaze to the village. But Kurama was there. Zetsu was there. Kakuzu was there. I lost my memories, committed horrendous acts on behalf of Akatsuki, and I met someone, my light in the darkness, the one who saved me from myself. Ajisai never really knew how important she was to me. How important she still is, Naruto smiled wistfully. I loved you, Ino, I really did. You were the love of my life, my old life. But things changed. I changed. You accepted that. He looked at his hand. I can still feel my ring, my true ring, the ring that I made when Ajisai and I became a couple, when I claimed her hand for marriage. No matter how perfect this illusion is, no matter how much I wish I could stay for a little longer, I still feel that other ring on my finger. No genjutsu in the world can rob me of that feeling. Ino said something, but he couldn't hear her anymore. He couldn't hear his son's cries, even though he saw the tears running down his chubby cheeks. It was as if the whole world was silenced. The wind through the trees, the bird chirping, the water flowing through the nearby canal, all those sounds had vanished. I will never again lose myself, Naruto vowed. You will never separate us again. The deafening silence was broken by the sound of breaking glass, as this false reality collapsed. It was the last he saw of his life that could have been. It was the last time he saw Ino as his wife, and Minato as his son. This was what could have been, had Zetsu not torn his life asunder. That dream had been destroyed. Letting go of it was something he had done before he had confronted pain, before Zetsu once more had tried to ruin his life. This life was something he had once desired, but he had changed, his heart had changed. So now, that dream of the past was shattered once more. He already had a new dream. Whatever future I have, it will be shared with you, Aji-chan. Chapter 26, Judgment. Defeat was no option, but the vexing fact remained that victory just seemed to be impossible. The gray-white-colored Naruto, she could see it wasn't Naruto himself who was in control, was too fast and too strong for her to have any hope of victory. There was only one real reason why she was still alive, and that was because this jubiatal Naruto was exceedingly stupid. No, stupid isn't the right word. It is more as if he is acting on instinct, like an animal, Ajisai corrected herself. While she was hardly talented in the area of taijutsu herself, even Ajisai had little difficulty to discern that Naruto lacked any form or stance in his combat style. It made him unpredictable, yes, but also very sloppy, leaving plenty of opportunities for her to exploit. Not that it did much more than even the odds a little. Shinra Tensei! She counterattacked, just in time, with him moving at speeds where her Rinnegan could barely keep up. It was only at the last second that she managed to divert his punch. There was no time to distract herself with analyzing the situation, if a fatal attack could be expected every possible second. His lack of form or style gave her a bit of reprieve, but that would have meant little if he had continued to attack her at full force. Yet, for some reason beyond her understanding, he didn't seem to be able to fully use those black orbs, although she wondered how they had been able to dispel each of her summons, even the multi-headed dog, that was supposed to keep splitting in two each time one was damaged significantly enough. In addition, nearly none of her jutsu worked against the orbs, the sole exception being the chakra absorption by Pretapath. However, if she switched to Pretapath and he decided to attack with taijutsu, she'd be left wide open. It only took a fraction of a second to switch to the abilities of Devapath, but that was time she couldn't spare in this situation. So yes, she counted herself lucky that Naruto was so mindless. She didn't want to think about what would happen if he became intelligent though. Deep down, she knew very well that she'd be a dead woman that same moment. Naruto roared out in frustration, before crashing down to the ground after he tried to get to his feet again. Once more he tried to get up, but Ajisai could see that something was going horribly wrong. The amounts of chakra that accumulated in his legs was massive, which led to his midsection bloating up like a balloon. What? Surprisingly, the mindless form of the Jubi-possessed Naruto didn't seem to have any clue about what happened to him either. Not willing to waste the chance given to her, Ajisai leapt back. Finally, she had some time to catch her breath. Only now did she realize how far they had strayed from where the Jubi had spawned that gigantic tree. Only now did she see how little was left of the entire area where once a village had been hidden. The very surface of this country had been altered by the events that had transpired here. Without any word or sign of warning, the upper half of Naruto's body suddenly extended. Like some kind of twisted from a snake, a scenario pulled right out of nightmares. Or, one that would induce nightmares. Gah! She dodged. Thank the heavens that he's slowed down by the bulk of his body, she muttered to no one in particular. Fu-tur! Naruto suddenly mumbled, almost causing Ajisai, in her surprise, to be caught off guard by the swipe of his claw-like hand. She still managed to evade, leaving him wide open for a counterattack. Rasengan! The attack bounced off his skin like usual, destroying her hopes that perhaps his bloated form had weakened him. In fact, Naruto could just as well have been stung by a mosquito, as he didn't notice the attack at all even though Ajisai knew all too well that her Rasengan could easily pierce boulders. His lips kept moving, as he turned to her again. Vaguely, she heard him say Sha-Ri, although she had to hurry to create distance again. Just in time, she sighed. Shinra Tensei, the attack, the only one in her repertoire that had some effect on him, forced him back. At least, the snake-like, extended upper half of his body. The bloated midsection and legs remained unmoved. The chakra inside him kept struggling, though more and more of Naruto's chakra started seeping through. The battle for dominance that Ajisai had thought that he had lost didn't seem to have ended just yet. Fu-tur! Ji-chan! The shards of the illusionary world fell, leaving him once again stranded in the familiar darkness. For a moment, for only the tiniest and shortest of moments, the return to the dark and illusionless realm was a relief. The sight of his son, illusion or not, was still burned into his mind's eye. Such a pure and innocent child. It was hard to fathom that someone with as much blood at his hands as he could potentially give life to such an innocent and cheerful child. Alas, that momentary bitter-tasting sense of relief was immediately eradicated by an overwhelming amount of pain. His arms were only barely attached, only a few strands of white stuff. His torso was mostly torn apart too, only a few of those white wire-like things that still kept his upper torso connected to his hips. He screamed. It was maddening. As if the mental pain of what he had just seen hadn't been enough, especially following the way he knew he had been defeated by Zetsu, he now felt as if his very soul was torn apart. Scratch that, it didn't just feel like it happened, it actually was what was going on. Only a very remote part of his brains registered that piece of information. The vast majority of his attention was consumed by the pain and the desperation that it brought along. The light was dying now. His sight faded when he felt his face crack. The tears that had spread through his body now reached up there too. He had lost. The Jubi would break into the seal and consume Kurama, and then the world would depend on what little mercy that monster was capable of feeling. He had failed them all. No amount of pain inflicted by his torn soul could match the sorrow and regret he felt due to that failure. He had failed everyone, Tsunade, who had nearly destroyed herself in her grief, would perish due to his weakness. Ino, even if he had given up the idea of chasing her romantically, was still too important a friend to lose to his foolish mistake. Kurama would suffer a fate worse than death, only because he had failed to see through Zetsu's schemes. And Ajisai, as his head started to split in two, stifling his cries of pain, he still felt the tears running down his cheeks. Ajisai. She had been through so much. She had died, literally, and her corpse had been desecrated for Nagato's deranged plans. She had come back to life, and trained harder than anyone could have expected her, grown stronger than she could have ever dreamt of becoming, because of him. He could not allow his beloved to die. His current state brought hellish pain, but that sensation paled in comparison to the idea of losing her. He had failed Guren, grown apart from Ino, and sacrificed the innocent Fu for a pointless cause, but the thought of losing Ajisai once more. No, all he could see was the image of Ajisai, sitting on the edge of their tree house, beaming with a content smile as if she was the happiest person alive. It was a smile he'd give everything for, a smile for which he'd sacrifice himself, in order to protect it. For she had been the one who truly brought him back to life, she had been the one who rescued him from a state worse than death, being an aimless and emotionless tool to Zetsu and Kakuzu. The Jubi no doubt wanted to turn him into such a tool once again. He would not allow himself to be reduced to that horrid empty state of existence. No, he had had enough of the schemes, the backstabbing, the hidden enemies that preyed on the power he held within him, and those who wished to obtain Kurama for their own ends. This was the end. No more. No, he roared, with all his might, until he could see nothing but a blinding amount of chakra. Everything he had, everything he could get from the vast sea of energy that nature offered, he used to overthrow the power that was invading him. Outrageous. It was the one and only word that existed for such blasphemous audacity. She had traveled, further than any of these little upstarts could imagine, to get to this place, only to have her efforts thwarted time and time again by this greedy and violent species. Humans. In hindsight, she wondered how she had ever considered mating with one of them. My naivety was staggering, she quietly accepted. She had just been liberated from 1,000 years of solitude, and she still voiced her thoughts aloud. Adjusting to an environment where she wasn't completely alone would take some time. But all these setbacks will soon be undone. Her infant child had worked tirelessly for nearly 1,000 years to undo the damage that its elder brothers had inflicted upon her. With her power scattered, her body sealed, and her essence locked away in a different dimension, the child had done good work to get her this far. It was regrettable that it had died in the process, laying down its life just before its plans came to fruition. Did she really care, though? No. That mongrel was something she had created in the tiny window of opportunity she had been given, shortly after she began to realize that her traitorous sons had found a way to defeat her. Demigods they might have been due to her blood, but still, the notion that she had suffered defeat seemed ludicrous to her. The creation of her Zetsu army had left her weakened, as the power of the Shinju had been exhausted in the process. The two had exploited that moment, fought valiantly, and eventually gotten the upper hand. Then, she was condemned to a fate worse than death, by her beloved children. It must have been their human blood which led to their repulsive behavior. This is clear, as my third child behaved itself far better, although it had only a sliver of my might. Now she stood in this sewer-like hallway. The damp and dirty environment was below her standard, to the point where her mere presence here felt like an insult. Yet it had to be done. The last of 9 fragments of her power rested behind this place. It irritated her how slowly she could seep its power from the self-aware fragment. The Kyubi, a mere beast, given shape by her son, dared to slow her down to this extent. No, that wasn't entirely true. The knowledge that she had inherited from her youngest child, the mongrel that had been the herald of her return, showed her how inadequate she was at the art of sealing. The ninjutsu that the violent human species had created was easily countered, but Fuinjutsu was something different, especially the otherworldly power she felt emanating from the seal that contained the Kyubi. Not even she, a matriarch of the Otsutsuki clan, would dare to underestimate the god of death. While time held less of a claim on her kind than it did on the human race, she too was ultimately a mortal being. Although, after she had united her power with that of the Shinju, she was fairly sure she now stood outside the reason of time. Still, she had lost many centuries due to the insolence of her sons. It left her impatient. Annoyed as she was, she almost missed the sudden shift in the atmosphere. How can a single human be so tenacious? She asked herself, slightly impressed that the child had managed to break free from the various restraints she had placed on him. For a simple human, it should have been impossible, unless his will is even stronger than my child thought. The potential of his genes seems to be greater than Tenji's was, she idly remarked. Alas, he'll still have to perish. She abandoned the door which led to Kurama's jail, although from his perspective, words such as bunker or fortress would be more appropriate for the seal right now. Had it not been for the seal, Kaguya would have completely absorbed Kurama already. Down through the damp sewer-like hallway the pale beauty walked, until she reached the door to the hall from where the boy's energy emanated. It was peculiar how a mere human had such a complex mindscape, a subject she intended to look into at a later time. I will have to explore it, because each of the fragments still holds their annoying personalities hidden deep down. I suppose I will have to break them, one by one, until they are truly dissolved into the combined power of me and the Shinju. The fact that there were minor changes in the boy's mindscape as his mood changed didn't elude her. It had been rather dark, only minutes ago, as if his consciousness had been on the verge of collapsing. In fact, it should have collapsed already. None had ever escaped the illusion of the perfect world. The dream which is rooted deepest within one's soul was something no living soul had ever wanted to escape from seeing fulfilled, in Kaguya's experience. Still, his soul is strange. Twisted, Kaguya mused. The mental damage I saw was extensive. Perhaps he did not truly become whole, despite having regained his old memories? I wonder how might Tsukuyumi would affect someone who holds two dreams in their heart. The illusion should have been perfect. She moved into the room, where the gentle glow had been replaced by a cold and clear light. The tropical forest which had once stood within this hall had apparently perished. It amused her. Your power is abandoning you, child, she stated loudly. Kaguya knew he was out there, somewhere, although she had yet had to see her opponent. You were in luck that I underestimated the consequences of your broken existence. Still, it is all futile. Why don't you yield, and end your torment? We may be adversaries, but I do admire the strength of your heart. Why don't you fuck off? She heard him utter in a low growl, after a few moments of silence. You are merely human, she chuckled. An insect cannot hope to overcome a goddess. You're no god of mine, Naruto bit back. You, Zetsu, pain. I've had enough of you delusional nutcases. You think yourself higher than anyone, yet all that you and your haughty ilk bring to the world is ruination. The chuckle died in her throat. The audacity of this human. Kaguya's eyes narrowed, all three of them, when Uzumaki Naruto stepped out of the lifeless forest that had previously obscured him from her vision. Had she not been enraged, Kaguya might have considered why she hadn't been able to see him sooner. She had her Byakugan activated, after all, but alas. Extending her arm, she shot out a bone. He'd be turned to dust for his words. Unexpected, she mumbled to herself, seeing how Naruto raised a wall of wood without any sort of movement from his arms. Considering how she knew through the knowledge distilled from the dark Zetsu that shinobi needed to channel their chakra and guide it through gestures with their hands. Hand seals, they called it. How primitive they still were. You think I'd just stand still and let you kill me? You must be even a greater idiot than I thought, Naruto taunted her. Quite successfully as well, as her hair shot up and strangled him. You know, there were a lot of reasons why I despised Kakuzu, but even after I've slain him I still have the feeling that I should have thanked him. Kaguya cocked her head sideways, wondering what the human was rambling about. Was it asphyxiation that addled his thoughts? A shinobi should never lose control of his emotions, or his enemy may exploit them as a weakness. Naruto gave her a shit-eating grin, before flipping her off. The action made Kaguya tighten the leash, until her snap and broke into pieces of wood. Shinrin, Naruto hissed, from somewhere behind her. Kaguya saw pale white branches shoot up around her, thick thorns growing from them. Each of the thorns was dripping with venom that seemed intent on only one thing, her death. Without a word, she pushed the branches aside, with nothing more than the power of her third eye. Manipulating the gravitational field worked, even within his mindscape. To rid herself of her stubborn enemy, she launched a barrage of hair needles. This time, she saw she had hit her mark. Is this supposed to be the power of a goddess? Naruto wondered aloud. His flak jacket was torn to shreds, and he tore its remnants off himself. The long-sleeved shirt underneath was, obviously, in no better condition, enjoying the flak jacket on the ground. Or is this why you needed those cowardly illusions? You truly seem to be enraged by what you saw. Kaguya was mildly curious as to why. It was supposed to show a world in which all his dreams were granted. Nothing about that should elicit such a response, should it? You made me denounce a family I could have had. You made me leave a child that could have been real. That felt real. You toyed with my heart and my soul, Naruto growled. You and Zetsu have treated me as some kind of convenient tool, one that was yours to use and throw away. But guess what, you bitch? This tool will bring about your end. Only a fool would grow too attached to her children, Kaguya smiled wistfully. Only a fool would say such a thing. He bit back and barely contained rage. She watched her opponent carefully. His power seemed to keep increasing without end. Red pigmentation surrounded his eyes, and a dot within a circle was seen on his forehead. But now that his torso was bare, Kaguya could also see 3 similar dots on his chest, in front of his spinal cord. These last 3 were connected to an intricate pattern of crimson lines that covered his entire upper body. Such big words about emotions. They can be a weakness, yes, but also a strength. Emotions can make a person fight harder and endure more pain than should be possible. But it could also lead to defeat. Your arrogance, for instance, gave me the chance to gather enough natural energy to completely fill out my reserves. It matters little who. Before she could finish her line, she saw how he threw a few chakra-laden red peppers at her. The flying objects changed into small clouds of biting red dust. Caught completely off guard, as she had expected him to launch some kind of big attack after all the chakra he had amassed, Kaguya dumbly looked at the small clouds, until the dust reached her eyes. That was, regardless of the difference in power, even she, a self-proclaimed goddess, was not able to stop herself from blinking. The burning sensation disrupted her sight, the irritation forcing her to rub her eyes and clean them of the offending matter. Time was not at his side. He knew that, yet at the same time he was acutely aware that he shouldn't rush himself. While he could feel how Kurama was weakening at a steady rate, the enemy that had just entered the forest hall within Naruto's mindscape was far too powerful to act hastily against. One slip, and all would be lost. The woman was pale and had pure white hair. In a sense, she was quite beautiful, Naruto had to reluctantly admit, as she seemed to shine as if the moonlight was trying to make her delicate facial features even more visible. Yet, in all her cold beauty, Naruto couldn't escape the thought that she seemed incredibly arrogant. The distant and detached expression shifted to mild annoyance once in a while, but generally just seemed dead set on looking down on all living things around her. Aside from her haughty demeanor, Naruto thought that the freaky third eye and the horns were detracting from her beauty as well. Beyond appearances, this woman made him cautious for the simple reason that she was strong, overwhelmingly strong, in fact. It was what had left him surprised to the extent that he, even in his rage, had stopped and kept himself hidden when she entered the hall. From the power he had sensed, he had anticipated her to be some kind of monstrous creature. To see this deceptively normal woman being the manifestation of the Jubi's power was confusing. This state of confusion was short-lived though, as Naruto still had the vibrant memory of his son in his mind. Little Minato-chan held within Ino's arms, looking at him, pleading with him to stay. That bitter memory filled the Jinchuriki with rage. The idea that someone had played with his heart in such a cruel way was unforgivable. Still, he had to tread with caution. Carefully stalling her, throwing her off balance with deliberate taunts, while gathering more and more natural energy. In this realm it seemed as if there was no limit to the amount he could gather. There was no corporeal body that had to sustain the immense strain of this energy, only his soul. Or is it because the Jubi is sealed within me that I can gather so much more energy? He wondered. He couldn't tell. He knew, however, that it would take time to gather the energy he needed, so he kept stalling her. Such big words about emotions. She seemed amused, clearly seeing how he tried to rein in his temper. They can be a weakness, yes, but also a strength, Naruto glared back. Emotions can make a person fight harder and endure more pain than should be possible. But it could also lead to defeat. Your arrogance, for instance, gave me the chance to gather enough natural energy to completely fill out my reserves. It matters little who, Akai Chishio no habanero, red-hot habanero, he whispered the moment she spoke up. The resulting cloud of pepper dust blinded her. It offered the perfect window of opportunity for him, so that he could put all his weight on offense without having to worry about defense. Shinra Ban Sho. All-covering forests and 10,000 things. He couldn't tell if she had noticed how he had infested the entire place with fungi, but he did know that it was too late for her. Whether she was stronger or not mattered little at this point. The deadly cloud of chakra-laden corrosive spores already enveloped Kaguya. Die! Naruto snarled, forcing the majority of his chakra into the cloud, releasing all his pent-up hatred. The forest of pale and lifeless thorn trees decayed until only dust remained. The cloud of corrosive fungi swallowed up everything, turning and swirling around Kaguya. Beads of sweat ran down Naruto's head, but he was too focused to notice them. All that mattered now was her destruction. This woman, This manifestation of the Jubi, she needed to die. She needed to get out of his mind. My, such ferocity. Naruto paled when he heard the amused voice from the center of the fungi cloud. Yasugami Kijiki, 80 gods vacuum fists, she laughed hollowly. The cloud of spores burst apart as a multitude of giant fist-shaped chakra manifestations rushed at him. Before he had the chance to even consider his options, the attack struck. And again you stand up. If you keep this up, I might truly be impressed, the white woman said with a maddening mirth in her voice. Can you not sense the difference between you and me? You are powerful. Overwhelmingly so. But regardless of the extent of your power, it is finite, Naruto stated calmly, ignoring his aching body. You might exceed me in ability, but that matters relatively little in this place. You arrogantly waltzed in here, not knowing that this is the exact spot where I connect to nature. Nature, Kaguya scoffed. Plants and animals should grovel at my feet, yet you speak of it as if it is more powerful than. There is no limit to the energy of nature, not that I can sense at least. Naruto interrupted. That is why I have been able to endure each of your attacks. And being in this place, I could increase my sage mode far beyond my usual limits. Yet I still say that this petty power-up is pointless. Against the might of an Otsutsuki, it matters little how much raw power you might gather, child. The woman chuckled when she saw the slight look of confusion in his eyes. You must wonder how I survived that earlier attack of yours. I possess the ability to absorb chakra, rendering every attack of yours pointless. Now, why don't you give up? There is no shame in admitting defeat, not when facing the strongest being that ever resided on this pathetic planet. You speak as if you are not from this planet. Correct. My name is Kaguya from the Otsutsuki clan. My clan is not from this planet. Is that so hard to comprehend? Kaguya smirked. My sons tricked me and sealed me away, and scattered my power over your pathetic kind, but my youngest child set everything up for my inevitable return. So chakra, it is derived from you. Naruto's eyes widened. The Biju are 9 parts of the combined chakra of me and the Shinju. Kaguya nodded, set on completely demoralizing the young man who had persisted and resisted far beyond anything she had ever seen before. She needed to break his will. Of course, my wayward son decided to split that vast quantity of chakra up over even more targets. Where did you think all those bloodlines started, boy? You humans never had such power before it was stolen from me. So, do you honestly think you could ever hope to defeat me when your sole weapon is a power that belongs to me? Giving up isn't exactly my forte, Naruto growled lowly. Perhaps I should explain to you what the true history of this world is, she smirked back at the agitated Uzumaki. Do you even know that the Shinju and I are not one and the same? What is that supposed to mean? Naruto eventually asked, the reluctance in his voice making Kaguya smirk even wider. My clan, the Otsutsuki clan, planted the Shinju on this planet. Its sole purpose, contrary to popular belief, is merely the gathering of energy. Me and my kin use its fruit as nourishment. Fruit for the gods should grow on the god tree, don't you agree? She chuckled at her own joke. Naturally, the Shinju derives its energy at the cost of the planet and its inhabitants, but its effects are barely noticeable. It takes a full millennium to grow one fruit, so the drain hardly affects the living beings on a planet. So you came here to eat the fruit of the Shinju, Naruto deduced. Then why did you unleash the Jubi upon the world? Kurama told me about the damage it did, about how mankind had been on the edge of extinction, but of course I did that. As I journeyed, I saw what mankind did to itself and to the planet. What could I do but draw the right conclusion? Kaguya frowned lightly, as if Naruto had made a stupid remark. I saw how humans pillaged the villages and cities of their enemies, how they enslaved, raped, and annihilated entire populations. I saw them drench entire battlefields with blood, and why? For imaginary gods, for valuables, for power, for their greed was their undoing. There were entire societies built on inequality between social positions where slaves and nobles continued an endless cycle of revolution and repression. Tell me, child, don't you agree that the world would be better off without your despicable species? No, but, so, even its last defender hesitates to call humanity good, the woman laughed cruelly. Priceless. Even my own sons, my flesh and blood, were blind to that truth. They refused to accept their divine heritage, opting to see themselves as humans instead. They thought I had succumbed to madness, and fought against me with all their might, and yet here you are. You don't have a drop of Otsutsuki blood within your veins, yet you see the truth they were blind to. Alas, if only I hadn't needed your body, or I'd have made you my servant, boy, Kaguya smiled at him. It was probably meant seductively, But by now, Naruto couldn't feel any sense of physical attraction to this woman. Even a goddess is not without desires of the flesh. But that matters little. My sons have shown me that half-breeds are unstable. Why else would they have maintained that the Shinju's fruit had corrupted their mother? Their human blood made them violent and treasonous, and it clearly addled their mental capacities as well. Mankind isn't all bad, you know. Oh? Why would you think that they are not undeserving of life? Mankind has its excesses in violence and cruelty, yes, Naruto admitted. But to balance out our bad qualities, we also have the capacity to do good. We create, care, love, and believe with proper guidance. We are capable of overcoming our shortcomings. Naruto silently thanked Kurama for the long conversations they had shared. TSK, idealism, Kaguya uttered the word as if it was a curse. Hopes and dreams change nothing, child. How disappointing that humanity will never be without conflicts. But that is how nature works. Trees grow tall, yet in doing so they put smaller plants in the shadow, their roots dig deeper and drink the water before the weaker plants can reach it. Nature itself is designed to rest on a foundation of competition. Without competition, in the complete absence of conflict, nothing would perish and nothing would grow or be born. The world would be stale, until it would finally begin to rot and wither away. Without change, how would we improve? Without making mistakes, how would we learn? You said yourself to be a goddess, so answer me that. It is barely an excuse for all the horrible acts I've seen mankind commit. I agree. Humanity must grow past this violence. It must be forced to see reason, and to abandon the never-ending spiral of hatred. In our desire to avenge the wrongdoings committed to us, we constantly create more strife. But if that cycle was broken, if our kind would see the errors of our ways, we would have a chance to evolve, Naruto reasoned. I've met a man who fancied himself a god, and he lectured that pain would force people to grow. He was only partly right. Pain does teach us valuable lessons. But without love, pain would be meaningless. We can't close ourselves off from the world because we suffer, as it would make us cruel and violent, but we can't completely open ourselves up either. Blind trust is too easily exploited, and a naive faith in the good of people would only prolong the cycle of conflict, as no problem would ever truly be dealt with. As eloquent as you may speak, you barely present an answer, Kaguya frowned. Balance is my answer. Naruto inclined his head slowly. Mankind is out of balance, has lost its connection to nature, and as such they can be more cruel and violent than any animal. The majority is simply blind, never realizing the truth about the world in which they live. They never see what nature truly entails, and are not constrained by those who do. Again about nature? The woman shook her head, disappointed. You wield so much power for a human, yet you still mean to say that you don't accept that you are superior to the rest? By right of power, you should have ruled this world, forced everything into peace. What am I but yet another little part of this world? Naruto asked rhetorically. I would not have been able to wield the power I possess if I had not accepted how limited I truly am. My power, my understanding, my heart. I am imperfect. Perfection is impossible for a mere human. Do you fancy yourself perfect, Otsutsuki Kaguya? Naruto chuckled. Because you are not. You do not comprehend nature, and just as many of my kind, you make the mistake of seeing yourself as superior to the world around you. You think you are somehow elevated above it all, separated, even though in truth you are just as much a part of the system as any other. You asked me why I persisted for so long. It is because, even if my power is greatly inferior to yours, I accepted that I am part of something far greater than myself. And that is what I want to show mankind, a lesson in humility and understanding, that we are not better than the world around us. It is also why I managed to withstand you for so long, and why I will win. You honestly believe that you can still be victorious? Kaguya was knocked slightly off balance because of that statement. I told you, your power cannot best mine. Even if you amass enough raw chakra to compete with me, it is still merely power that was stolen from me. Every jutsu requires chakra, yes, Naruto nodded. But chakra differs in structure and density. Some of my jutsu require the chakra that I naturally possess, while some need to be purely fueled with the chakra that Kurama gave me, such as the Shinra Bansho jutsu. Kaguya laughed at this. Naruto tried to remain calm and composed, even though his seething temper desperately wished to lash out against the woman. But he knew he'd have to be patient. My chakra is ineffective. What little I still have of Kurama's chakra is also ineffective, as she just showed me. So, there's only one gamble left. And if what she just told me is true, but I need more. If I try to solely do that jutsu with that, I need more. I can't rely on Kurama's chakra this time. You were so interesting, Kaguya finally uttered, having stopped herself from laughing at the Jinchuriki. But it turns out that you have no answers and no power. You follow a philosophy belonging to the weak. Even if you are far above all other humans, you have disappointed me, Uzumaki Naruto. I even decided to be merciful and not end this fight the instant I entered this hall, as I thought that your stubbornness entertained me while I drained the beast of its remaining power. What's wrong? Can't find the words to refute my point of view. Naruto tried to stall her for a little longer. Can't handle the fact that there are no easy answers, and that solutions involve more than just forcing it with your power? A proper discussion would presume that we are equal, at some level. We are not, Kaguya smirked. Your life already belongs to me. I thought it would be entertaining to break you, but it turned out to be boring. Suddenly Naruto felt as if he was tied down by invisible and unbreakable ropes. Kanashibari no Jutsu, temporary paralysis technique, he wondered. A powerful pulse of Senjutsu chakra broke the jutsu, just in time to evade a spike of bone which Kaguya had just fired at him. Naruto gulped when he saw how the bone disintegrated the tree in which it landed. She really stopped beating around the bush. Damn, you broke free? She seemed mildly surprised. Very well, she dismissed what had occurred and summoned 10 black orbs of chakra. There will be no more evasion, boy. You seem in a hurry. All of a sudden, I have wasted enough of my time toying with you. It is time to retrieve my chakra. I might not be able to use Mugen Tsukuyumi, as I already ensnared everyone with the Shinju, but that is of no consequence now. Her previous smirk now settled for a more neutral expression. A cold and indifferent expression, to be precise. I had intended to replace mankind with a more useful species. But after all that has happened, it would be more fitting if I just wiped out everything. This miserable world needs to pay the price for what was done to me. She'll murder everyone if I don't act quickly, Naruto grimaced. Damn it. If she used the power of the Shinju to trap everyone, and has the ability to drain chakra, it would only be a matter of time until every living thing in the world will die of chakra exhaustion. Hopefully I have gathered enough chakra now. The 10 black orbs which Kaguya had created flew with breakneck speeds at Naruto. She didn't even bother to attack him from various angles, believing he would not be able to evade an attack this fast. And if he were foolish enough to try to block, well, there was nothing a good Adama, truth-seeking ball, could not pierce. Or so she thought. Senpo Mokuton, Kanon Ryot, Sage Art would release, Kanon's hands, Naruto muttered in relief, seeing that he had literally dodged the bullet. If he had been a fraction of a second later, impossible, Kaguya glared with all 3 of her eyes at Naruto. Those orbs cannot be blocked. You revealed your own weakness, blabbering like an idiot, the Uzumaki chuckled. You wanted to end this. Let me show you the complete version of this jutsu. Senpo Mokuton, Shinjuchuman Kanon, Sage Art would release, the true 11-headed Kanon, he shouted. The massive wooden hands which he had previously spawned now grew arms. The hands took hold of the ground, and from the very soil under Naruto's feet an enormous wooden Buddha rose up. Now was the time to see if his gambit would pay off. If all chakra originates from her, why does she not understand the power of natural energy? It would mean that she does not comprehend Senjutsu, had been his train of thought. And if she does not understand Senjutsu, a jutsu purely fueled by natural energy might stand a chance, right? Aside from that, I still have no idea why I knew how to exactly create the Juchuman Kanon, or how I was able to use it with such specific abilities. So, where do the Senpo Jutsu come from if not from her? And if it is not from her, might she be vulnerable against it? It was a shaky line of reasoning, but it was the last line of defense he could depend on. The palm of the left hand that brought death, while the palm of the right hand that negated all jutsu. The Juchuman Kanon had powers, which Naruto still hadn't completely figured out how and why it had gotten it. The notes made by Uchiha Madara regarding Hashirama's ultimate jutsu had been quite different. The giant wooden Buddha statue sat in lotus position, seemingly perfectly at peace, but lashed out at Kaguya when Naruto directed it. As if swatting a fly, the 2 massive hands descended upon the Otsutsuki, the 2 palms aiming to crush her in between. What? Naruto blinked. He looked again, but no, she wasn't there. Behind, he grunted. Kaguya launched a barrage of bones at the wooden giant, but was caught off guard when the 2 hands of the Kanon burst from the ground and captured her. I got her, Naruto gasped. She didn't. Wait, what the... The dozens of bones which Kaguya had shot out earlier had landed all over the torso of the Juchuman Kanon. Due to the sheer size of the animated statue, it took some time until the effects of the corrosive bone became visible. With his eyes wide open, Uzumaki Naruto could only watch in horror as his last hope literally began to crumble away from underneath his feet. That was unexpected, a blood-covered Kaguya mumbled. The shoulders of the cannon had rotted away, and its mighty arms fell with a thundering clap onto the ground. It revealed that the Otsutsuki was harmed, with multiple cuts and her right arm dangling at an odd angle, but still very much alive. For a moment the self-proclaimed goddess needed to focus on her own body, healing the damage that Naruto had inflicted. She idly wondered what could have happened to her if not for her all-killing ash bones. Never would she have expected a mere human to be able to harm her. Her sons had been of her divine blood, thus it was to be expected that they had been able to seal her. But even they had only managed to inflict bodily harm when they used the good Adama. That was a dangerous little trick, boy. All of Kaguya's 3 eyes were now directed at Naruto. The extent of her displeasure was painfully obvious. Not even a hint of amusement at Naruto's panicked expression could be seen or heard. The prey that she had been toying with all this time had just managed to harm her. Her earlier annoyance turned into a murderous determination. Not dangerous enough, Naruto spat, embittered by the loss of the cannon. In an instant, the woman lunged forwards and planted a fist in his stomach. With no laughter, no taunts, but rather in complete silence, she walked towards his slumped-down form. In the background, Naruto heard another part of the now immobilized cannon fall down, as the bones continued to turn the giant mass of wood into ash. Still, at this rate, it would take another few minutes before the giant would be completely scattered in the winds. To think that I had to resort to the Tomagoroshi no Haikatsu, all-killing ash bones, and still had to depend on luck for my survival. Ludicrous. Kaguya shook her head, now standing in front of Naruto. Not so divine after all? Naruto smirked weakly. No matter the odds, he didn't lose his defiant streak. It changes nothing about the outcome. You are spent. Yeah, but if I die now, my inner world would collapse. Naruto, out of nowhere, drew a wooden kunai. An inner world requires but one ego to sustain it. Kaguya swatted away the kunai before he could plunge it in his own throat. All the power you possess, as well as your body, will belong to me. But that does not imply that I will let you kill yourself, child. You have annoyed me, so I will personally end your existence. But before you die, you should know that I am going to pluck the Rinnegan from the corpse of that little girlfriend of yours. I am done with you. As she uttered that last threat, with more venom than Naruto had ever heard her speak, she drew one of her bones out of her own arm. So she wished to turn him to ashes, not a pleasant prospect. Die, she hissed in his ear, driving the bone, as a thrusting weapon, right into his chest. The corners of her mouth tugged up slightly when she heard him groan out in pain, and she cruelly drove the bone even deeper. I told you. I don't. He glared up, ignoring the excruciating feeling of his chest slowly being turned to ash. I don't give up easily. Much to her surprise, he suddenly grabbed her by her wrists. As his sage mode had yet to run out, his physical power was still far beyond any other mortal man she had ever faced before. He had survived the impact of her Yasugami Kijiki, 80 gods' vacuum fists, what had already proven his strength to her. But why would he smirk with such defiance in his expression, when his body had already started to disintegrate? She didn't know, not until she heard a voice behind her, rising up from the rotting remains of the Juchumen cannon. Senpo Mokuton, Cannon Ryot, Sage Art would release, Cannon's hands, unlike the statue itself, which was slow and cumbersome in spite of its overwhelming power. If Naruto merely created the hands of the cannon, the attack was as swift as it was lethal. In spite of his exhaustion and the horror he had felt when Kaguya had started to turn his trump card into dust, Naruto had not lost the ability that Kakuza had hammered into him above all other, using his mind. From the moment Naruto had woken up from the near-death that Zetsu and Kakuza had put him in, from the moment he had basically lost his first life, they had put him through a horrendous cycle of training, what was basically just another name for attempted murder and recovery. From the very first moment, Kunemori of Akatsuki had been forced to adapt, as he constantly fought opponents who were superior in power. With all that training, being able to constantly adapt his strategy was a basic skill he had nearly instinctively mastered. So when Naruto saw that he was losing his Juchumen cannon, he knew he only had one alternative. He lacked the reserves to recreate the cannon, and lacked the time to refill his reserves. He couldn't fight her head-on, so the only way out was deception. It was a dangerous gamble against someone who wielded both Byakugan and, as far he could see, a mutated form of the Rinnegan. If she had been on her guard, if she had kept her eyes on him as any proper shinobi would have done, she would have seen how he had sunken into the decaying statue. She would have seen that he had left a Moku Bunshin behind, but she didn't see any of it. I told you that you revealed your own weakness. Naruto glared at the two enormous hands that were clasped together with Kaguya in between. And I wasn't just pointing to the possibility that my Senpo Jutsu might work against you. It was your arrogance that blinded you, that made you fail to see me coming. The hands of the Kannon clenched tightly, with the deadly thorns of the left palm piercing the white flesh of the haughty Otsutsuki, injecting the chakra that would bloom into a poison that would end her life, while the right hand's influence kept her from diverting her chakra into any form of counterattack. The hand even prevented her from draining the chakra out of the wooden appendages, the chakra through which Naruto controlled the hands. I hope the true gods will take pity when they judge your soul, Naruto growled. Not that you will receive any pity from me. He forced the hands so close to each other that Kaguya began to feel her bones break under the pressure. She cried out, not merely due to the pain, but due to the frustration she felt. Unlike her, Naruto did not play with his prey. A sickening squelch ended her torment in a manner that would have made Kakuzu proud. If these past years had taught him one thing, a lesson that his naive former self would never have accepted, it was that some people simply did not deserve mercy. Some had done things that put them beyond redemption. Sacrificing a large part of mankind and turning them into the living husks that were the Zetsu was one of those irredeemable things. And above all, you really should not have threatened Aji-chan, you three-eyed bitch. Chapter 27, Reformation. He tried to see but... Hey, Kurama, you there? Yes. I'm still here, the fox spoke up after a few dreadfully silent seconds. For a moment, Naruto feared that he had been too late in defeating Kaguya, and that she had consumed all of the Kyuubi's chakra. He let out a deep sigh in relief. The fox sounded exhausted, but at least he was still intact. Shrunken, probably, but that would be fixed eventually. Could you help? Naruto asked tiredly. His body was brimming with chakra, but it was rather weird and difficult to control right now. I'm as blind as a bat. I just barely escaped a fate worse than death, and you're already hounding me? Pesky humans, Kurama sighed. Fine, I'll help you direct your chakra. Your eyes are gone, but considering your chakra currently exceeds the usual limitations, recreation should lie within my ability. Really? Naruto would have blinked if he had eyes. That sounds imposed. When a Biju dies, it is capable of recreating its body after some time, remember? Of course. Sorry, he thought sheepishly. He felt the flow of chakra change, and made an effort to not hinder Kurama in any way. Such was the trust he had in the fox, his friend, that he basically lowered every sort of defense. He knew that, if Kurama so wished, the fox could use that moment to instantly destroy the seal that kept the being imprisoned, but the Kyuubi refrained from doing so. Not due to exhaustion, not due to some sense of honor, not even because the fox respected the boy's current power, but rather because they trusted each other. After all the hardships they had gone through together, their bond had changed fundamentally, and they both knew it even if either admitted it out loud. Open them, Kurama eventually huffed, sounding perhaps even more exhausted than before. Now I need some time to regain. Ugh, I'd kill for some sleep. So hurry up and finish this. Thank you, Kurama. I'll make sure humanity will know the part you played in their salvation. As if I could give a rat's ass about that, the audibly cranky Biju grumbled before cutting off the connection. Naruto lifted himself from the crater in which he had found himself waking up. The sense of awe he felt was instantly replaced by worry, as he saw the extent of the damage around him. Fuck. I've really gone wild, haven't I? Naruto cursed, desperately searching his surroundings for the chakra signatures of his friends for Aja's eyes. Most of all, 9 orbs of solid black chakra seemed to distort his senses. The moment he became aware of them, he realized that he could change their shapes with a mere thought. What did Kaguya call these things again? Gudadama? Truth-seeking ball? Naruto touched one of the orbs, and made it change shapes. Changing one from a cube to a rectangle, he eventually settled on making it a flat saucer-like circle. Stepping on it, he used it to float up. This method of flying was a bit scary at first, as he didn't like losing touch of the earth under his feet, but he needed to get a better view of this battlefield. All the orientation points seemed strange to him. The last thing he remembered was standing in the middle of Takigakure, or at least the remnants of that village, where he was surrounded by mountains. This landscape, however, barely contained any mountain that was worth noting. There were plenty of scattered boulders, though. From his vantage point, Naruto finally noticed a familiar shade of orange. While he missed the color of lavender, he'd be lying if he ever said orange looked bad on her. Orange had always been his favorite color, even before Zetsu had warped him. Her Rinnegan required some more getting used to, though he wouldn't say that to her. Hurting her feelings was the last thing he wanted. But those eyes were things that he associated with pain, the enemy, so… With a little time that shouldn't matter to me anymore, I'm just glad she's still alive. Though I'm not complaining that she lost those piercings. Why don't you stop rambling and hurry? Her chakra is nearly completely depleted, Kurama remarked, apparently unable to sleep. It might not be immediately life-threatening, but I'd say that bringing her to that big-chested Kaguya of yours would be best. She's no longer my Kaguya, Kurama, Naruto reminded the fox. You are going through with that plan? I might need some help, the Uzumaki admitted sheepishly. Like a lot of it. Any idea on how to communicate it to the rest? Assuming that you mean to imply that you wish to converse with every shinobi when you use that vague the rest, I'd say leave them stuck in the Shinju while you fetch that Yamanaka girl. With her help, you should be able to reach all the souls connected to the god tree. I suppose that could work. I do feel everyone now that you say it. I did stop the Shinju from draining their chakra. It seems like it would be overkill if I weaken them even more. The shinobi population has already lost a great deal of chakra, and it appears to be a permanent decrease in their reserves as well. I don't think that weakening them too much would be healthy though, correct? If the shinobi lose too much of their power, the non-shinobi forces will try to usurp the position they hold, leading to new forms of chaos. But at least they are now weakened enough to diminish the consequences of future rogue shinobi. Yeah, we wouldn't want another organization such as Akatsuki, with shinobi that are capable of wiping out entire villages. Whatever. Once you free my brethren from the clutches of the tree, you don't need to worry. Even the likes of Pain would be mere ants for you to step on. I don't want that sort of power, Naruto scowled. I'm not Kaguya, just go to your vixen, Kurama laughed at the boy's indignation. Though I would advise you not to impregnate her while the Shinju is still out, and you are like this. Unless you want little Otsutsuki babies, of course. Kurama! The Jinchuriki blushed up a storm, in spite of his now pale skin. He really hoped his looks would return to normal after he took down the Shinju and extracted the Biju from it. Ignoring the laughing fox, or at least trying to do so, the loud roaring laughter within his mindscape was rather hard to shut out in his current state of embarrassment. Naruto ordered his flying saucer to fly in Ajaci's direction. Legs? Check. Arms? Check. Torso? Check. All seemed to be intact. Well, mostly. She wearily thought. Seems like I was just in time with that last Shinra Tensei. Ugh, my reserves are really completely spent now. That was rather bad news. Whatever the hell had just occurred, it could not be good. In fact, she knew that he, though she preferred to refer to him as it at this point, had lost no power at all. The bloated form of what was the Jubi-controlled Uzumaki Naruto had tried to attack her over and over again, but in the form it had at the time, it was no longer fast enough. Apparently, self-destruction was the answer to it. If not for the Rinnegan, I would never have seen it coming. The way he kept amassing chakra was a dead giveaway to someone who could see chakra, so she had already kept her distance. But rather than some kind of big jutsu, what she had been anticipating, it had just kept gathering chakra until it reached the point that it destabilized and exploded, taking along a large part of the already mutilated landscape. Of course, that was not the end. She had used Shinra Tensei, pouring all her remaining power into the jutsu, in a desperate attempt to shield herself. It was too much and too fast to switch to Preta path and attempt to absorb it. Such quantities of chakra would have destroyed every last chakra pathway in her body, even if there had been a chance to switch. It was very difficult to imagine that there had once been a thriving village in this region, that these very grounds had been fertile and filled with trees. Now, it just looked like some kind of apocalyptic landscape, as if a comet had struck down and wiped out everything. She was tired, so terribly tired. Her every limb trembled as she strained to get back up on her feet. She needed to be ready for its next attack. Though she wondered whether her body could endure another. Perhaps it wasn't just her body that was exhausted. Naruto-kun, why didn't I go with you when you had to leave AIM? She mumbled near deliriously. I know you'd say I couldn't, that I shouldn't, because it'd be too dangerous for me. But if I had gone with you, this wouldn't have happened, would it? You wouldn't have lost me. I wouldn't have lost you. Those last words were practically sobs, and tears blinded her already fuzzy eyesight. She didn't have enough physical energy left, nor was her spiritual energy enough, to keep herself together. Sadness, anger, frustration, it all boiled over and came out in tears. The once so stoic and reserved Ajaci had reached her limits. When she saw a blurry silhouette come down in front of her, she still continued, for Naruto, for that impossible dream they had held within their hearts, even if it had only been for a short time. She couldn't say she regretted the fact that she was about to die again. There was only one thing about her life that she wished she could change. I wish I could have lived at your side sooner, Naruto-kun, she cried. Rasengan! The blur only moved a few inches back, even though she had put all she had into that last attack. As usual, it remained completely silent. She had hoped she had at least done some damage, but knew that such hope was foolish. No ninjutsu seemed to have any effect on the Jubi, ever. The jutsu innate to the Rinnegan were an exception to that rule, apparently, but considering how her Deva path was still on recharge. Sinking to her knees, she resigned herself to her fate. Go on, kill me. She took one last look at the wooden ring Naruto had given her, trying and failing to contain her tears. It's not like the Jubi. Naruto grabbed her by her shoulders, silencing her. Convinced that it was about to finish her off, she squeezed her eyes shut. Wait, what's it doing? She felt warm, and its proximity was unusually close as in being in hugging distance. Well, the arms that held her close to him were a dead giveaway as well. Could it can't be, can it? Why would I ever wish to kill you? The comforting voice of Uzumaki Naruto dragged her out of her thoughts, and made her open up the waterworks completely. Why, you fool? I know, Naruto awkwardly patted his crying fiancé on her back. I'm sorry for worrying you. But it's over now, Aji-chan. It is finally over. I'm sorry that Before he had managed to finish his line, she smacked her lips on his, resulting in a searing kiss either would ever forget. Although, they at that moment, completely forgot about everything around them. The country around them had been torn apart by the Jubi, Shinju, and when Kaguya had tried to take over his body. Amidst this apocalyptic view, the two lovers only had attention for each other. As heartwarming as your reunion is, Kurama cleared his throat after gracefully having given his Jinchuriki a bit of time to enjoy the proximity and taste of his woman. You didn't forget about the entire world population being trapped within the clutches of the Shinju, did you? Ugh, humans, cut me some slack. Just keep your clothes on and hurry up. I suggest liberating the ones you need is your first priority now. Getting cubs can be done later, the fox sighed. And don't think I didn't notice what's on your mind right now. I'd rather avoid being the spectator of this peep show, thank you very much. Naruto blushed, and forced himself to end the kiss before he couldn't stop himself from ravaging Ajisai right then and there. Judging by her heated expression, her thoughts weren't too far from that point either. His blue eyes radiated a hunger he'd need to postpone now, no matter how it annoyed him. I love you, Aji-chan, he squeezed her hands. But as much as I wish I could continue to kiss you, I think we have some friends who would like to get freed. At this, her eyes widened and her blush only intensified. I know, I nearly forgot as well, he admitted sheepishly. Can you absorb chakra? Why yeah? She stammered. Right after she felt a massive flow of chakra from his hands. I can use Pretapath, the orange-haired girl mumbled. How much? I don't know what limits I have in this state, he chuckled. I destroyed the ego of Otsutsuki Kaguya, the woman who was originally merged with the Shinju, and became the Jubi, but apparently I still have all the power. At least, until I destroy the Shinju and liberate the Biju. You're going to give up that power? It is too much power for one man to have, he admitted earnestly. Even for me, the risks are simply too great. I already have too much blood on my hands to say that I'm a good guy. No, I'd rather be my old self again. It would be better for me, and better for the world at large. Besides, I promised Kurama that I'd free the Biju, but before that, I'll shake up the shinobi world, and destroy the foundation of violence on which it was built. It is about time we ended all the wars, don't you agree? His carefree smile removed the shadow of doubt that his words had cast over her. Through the Pretapath she could feel his might, yet even she could not imagine how powerful he could be if she thought about how his sage mode could increase his current power. Despite that, he was willing to throw that power away, without any hesitation. Only you, Naruto-kun, only you. What? She leaned forward and kissed him, this time without deepening it. Let's go. Swearin, Ino, Tsunade, Konan, everyone is waiting. Yeah, let's get it over with. If I stick in this form for too long I might just end up becoming as monstrous as the Jubi was. The carefree way in which he said it stood in stark contrast with the panicked look Ajisai gave him. These robes fit nicely, and these black ping-pong balls are useful. But you really think a human such as me could contain such power without being changed by it? I see, she swallowed. You're not going to lose your whiskers, will you? I don't know. He blinked, confused by the sudden switch in the conversation. Not to mention that the slight pout made him wonder why she suddenly found those whiskers so important. Why would it be important if I lose them? Well, just don't, she huffed, before dragging the white-clad Jinchuriki closer. They look cute. Naruto ignored the exasperated sigh within his head, and shortly after, closed off the connection when Kurama began to make gagging sounds. After all that happened, after all the time they had been separated, Naruto just couldn't resist kissing Ajisai. Whether or not his hand wandered down a little while they were busy wouldn't hurt anyone. After all, it wasn't like anyone aside from them was going to move by themselves. It felt so warm, so secure, yet all of a sudden that comfort had left her. It made her wonder what had happened to get her here. It was all so fuzzy and, well, the word blank came to mind. For her, as someone of a clan filled with mind readers, it was frightening to realize that she had a gap in her memories. What's the last I can remember? Focus, Sino, focus, she scolded herself. Let's see. Hinata-chan said she saw that we succeeded, that Ajisai transferred the other half of the Kyuubi, and that Naruto had been freed. Yes, after that we moved to attack the Kyuubi, but what happened after that? She groaned when the last remnants of warmth fled away, after which she was exposed to the chilly air outside the. Why on earth was I wrapped up in a cocoon, blinking, as the cold air it had been so intoxicatingly comfortable within that darn cocoon got in her eyes? Yamanaka Ino took a moment to look around. Whatever she had expected to see, this was not it. A tree that was greater than any she'd ever seen before was looming over them, while her surroundings had changed completely. As if someone had decided to thoroughly redecorate the landscape. What once had been Takigakure was now merely a collection of craters. Yo, a calm voice greeted her from behind her. Everyone up? Yes, a polite answer came. Why yes, a second affirmative came, though this was the familiar, yet hesitant, voice of Shizen. What the hell did you do, brat? And there was her Hokage, Senju Tsunade, with her usual subtlety. Naruto? Ino jerked around, seeing the Jinchuriki with his arm lifted up in a greeting posture. His other arm was currently occupied, as Ajisai was practically glued to his side. Ino, Naruto smiled, though she wondered why his eyes showed a hint of pain. Little did she know that he, just by seeing her, had relived that cruel illusion that Kaguya had tried to trap him in. True, that life had been the dream of the Naruto that had left Konoha, years ago, but the current Naruto had a different dream, and thereby his reason to escape the supposedly infallible genjutsu. While ignorant of what had happened, Ino was well aware of the fact that things had changed, and had reconciled with that fact. There was no use clinging to times that had long since passed. She refused to become a person like Tsunade, deeming herself too young to end up being broken like that. You're free? Is it over? She ignored the fact that Tsunade, Shizen, Konan, and even Swearin were already trying to get back on their feet. She was too busy staring at the now white-clad and pale Uzumaki to bother getting up from the ground where the cocoon had opened. Yup, he chuckled. It's all over. It's not, Ajisai rolled her eyes. Don't lie, Naruto-kun. I'm not. The battles are over, Aji-chan, he whined. You shouldn't count the fools that are going to go against our plan. I suppose you're right. At this point no one would be able to put up much of a fight against you, the Rinnegan bear mused. Or me, she added cheekily. I'll destroy anyone who dares try taking you away from me. What are you two talking about? Tsunade narrowed her brown eyes, her shaky arms crossing underneath her impressive chest. What kind of plan? You'll see soon enough, Bachan, Naruto chuckled. If you and Shizen-nichan would be so kind and patch up Ino-chan. I'll be in need of her and her abilities, preferably as soon as possible. Where is the Kyuubi? Konan questioned, making Ino wonder why she herself hadn't thought of that rather important thing yet. The Kyuubi was, after all, the threat that could destroy the world. It couldn't have just gone up in smoke, could it? That's complicated. The smile of the Uzumaki faltered slightly. Let's say that part of it is dead, another part is out there, he pointed at the Shinju, while the other part resides within me. That is not very specific, brat, Tsunade scowled. But you beat it, right? Partly, Naruto again dodged the question. I know, he put up his hand, the one not held by Ajisai, in defense. I know it is frustrating, but I'll answer your question soon. Though I suppose you might be even more frustrated when you do get the answers. Perhaps I shouldn't say a thing? What are you intending to do with all that power? Konan wasn't intending to let herself be distracted by the pale Jinchuriki. Like Ino, and like the others as well, she was confused about why his skin had become so pale. The change in clothing was peculiar as well, as he now wore a full-bodied black garment with black pants, gloves, and boots, over which he had a flowing white robe with 6 black Magatama markings across his chest and 3 more of the 9-like symbols on his back. Even his bright blonde hair had grown several shades paler, but at least his eyes were the same bright blue as they always were, though for Konan and Swearin, Unlike Ino, Tsunade, and Shizen, there was an unfamiliar glint of mischief in those blue eyes. The two of them had, unlike the Leaf Ninja, not known him from before he had died at Kakuzu's hands. Oh, nothing much. Just a complete reform of the shinobi world, he said offhandedly. I might need to take away the privilege of wielding chakra from a few hundred shinobi, but aside from that there will not be so much change. At least, not for you guys who wish for peace. The warmongers, on the other hand, Ajisai smirked, will need persuasion. Yup, they're screwed, Naruto nodded. So if you'd please get Ino-chan back on her feet with full chakra reserves, then I'll convey that message to everyone. 5 blank stares were the answer they got. Naruto-kun, I don't think you clarified how you intend to connect to people. Nor to whom you'll be talking, correct? Conan agreed with Ajisai. Everyone as in, everyone? Yes, Bachan. Everyone. You guys are the first ones I freed from the Shinju, now that the God Tree is part of me. But everyone else is still trapped in cocoons such as those. He pointed up at the massive branches of the Shinju, where countless cocoons were still hanging. The Shinju caught every living being with a trace of chakra within them, which is basically everything alive. All I need is for Ino to help me communicate with them. With every shinobi in the world? The Yamanaka paled. That's impossible. Meh, don't freak out, Naruto waved it away. I'll set up the connection. It's just, I can convey feelings, but coherent words are a lot more difficult. You, on the other hand, have been trained in this for years. It might take some chakra to sustain that connection, but I'll make sure that I bear the vast majority of that strain. And with Aji-chan, Bachan, and Shizen-nichan around, there are 3 people who can support you. This is insane, Swayer mumbled. The green-haired girl shook her head. I know you're powerful, but that's simply impossible. No, it's not. It does sound unrealistic, Shizen hesitantly chimed in. Ugh, if the brat says he can do it, I'll trust him. Tsunade decided to back him up. But all this stuff about plans. Are you ready to take over my hat? Me? Naruto blinked in surprise. Hokage? Nay, sorry Bachan, but I don't think that'll be good for anyone. Why? I'm going to become the leader of a neutral party. He chose his words carefully. And if any of the villages were too closely tied with the person who is basically the Jinchuriki of all 9 Biju, well, inequality doesn't exactly promote peace, does it? You are leaving Konoha? Tsunade stared at him. I asked you, before this mess began, if you thought that I'd still be suitable to be a shinobi of Konoha. Now I know the answer. I'm not. I cannot be part of an institution when I am going to deconstruct and reshape the system in which that institution operates. Such a paradox would undermine all our efforts. Becoming Hokage was once my dream, as I wanted everyone to acknowledge me for whom and what I was. But right now, after all that I've been through, after all the power I gained, I realize that I need to aim for something higher. Absolute peace is impossible, but I will at least make an effort to wipe out the large-scale conflicts. To do that, I'll need to stand above the hidden villages that form the bulk of every nation's military power. You plan to be a dictator? Conan glared at him, obviously misunderstanding his words. He is not, Conan San. Ajisai swallowed the honorific midway. He is merely intending to be a guide. As for his power, he intends to give up most of it. I promised Kurama that I'd free him and the other Biju, and I intend to keep my word, Naruto nodded. While I'll still be far more powerful than any other shinobi, I wouldn't be too powerful. The idea that he'd one day start to see himself as a god, just like Kaguya had done, frightened him. However, he figured that his situation was different from hers, simply because he wasn't alone. Then the villages. There will be no more Jinchuriki. Naruto knew where Tsunade was going. The Biju will be dealt with in due time, but Kurama thinks that it is highly likely that they'll all agree to help me and the group that I'll form. So, now that we've gone past the introductions, can we move on and continue with the plan? I'd rather not keep the Shinju out longer than necessary, as it requires quite a bit of concentration to prevent it from continuing to drain the world's population of chakra. Very well, Tsunade muttered. Don't look so sad, Bachan, Naruto sighed. It's not like I'm going to destroy the world or anything. It's just that I am going to forbid warfare and armed conflict between villages in general. While that's going to change the way a hidden village needs to generate revenue, as the whole economy will change as a consequence, it is not the end of the shinobi system. I'll trust that you know what you are doing. I still don't like it that you refuse to go back home, though. Greetings, everyone. I hope you have all enjoyed your slumber within the embrace of the God Tree. There is no cause for fear. I am well aware that, especially in our world, trust is something that is hard to give. Regardless, I ask you all to calm down and trust me. You, and every other living soul with you, will soon be released from the cocoon that traps you, but first there are a few things that I need to share. First and foremost is the announcement that there will be an assembly in the region that was formerly Takigakure. The Gakage, as well as the other leaders of the hidden villages, are expected to attend this meeting. We recently averted the annihilation of the human race, and as a consequence your leaders need to be informed about several things. Rest assured, though, in the knowledge that the Jubi is defeated. Mankind is free to live another day. However, my second point is that, from this moment on, armed conflict between nations or villages is forbidden. Fail to heed my warning, and you will lose your ability to manipulate chakra. This threat is not an idle one, as I am the one who is currently in control of the very thing that managed to capture every living being on this planet. Furthermore, you should note that I am the Jinchuriki of all 9 Biju. While I prefer to avoid conflict, I would advise you not to ignore my warning. Many wrongs have been done in the past, and I am willing to forget about them. We should not allow ourselves to be defined by the sins of our past. Nor should we intend to pursue vengeance for grievances of the past. Rather than linger, we must learn from our past, use it as a lesson and move on. All I wish for is for the world to be at peace. I stopped the Jubi from destroying the world, but I will not, and cannot, tolerate you continuing to walk a similar path of destruction. As such, Kyumogakure and Kanahagakure are to immediately cease their actions against the Wagakure. Likewise, the rebels within Kirigakure are to retreat. Go back to your homes. If you do not cease your military activities, I will see myself forced to intervene. If there is any individual or group foolish enough to wish to challenge me, I ask you to arrive before the assembly commences, rather than disrupting it. While I will not hold your past transgressions against you, I will show no mercy against those whom insist on continuing these meaningless conflicts and wars from now on. In 2 weeks' time your leaders are expected to attend the assembly in the territory where Takigakure was once located. There we will discuss both the past and the future of our nations. There we will discuss how the current conflicts came to be, as well as how we can end them. So, leaders of the shinobi world, come to the assembly in 2 weeks' time. Until then, I pray that you wish to live in peace. Naruto sighed, relieved that it was finally over. At the start, he had paused for a moment, as he could feel the confusion and growing sense of panic of those who had been woken by the pulse of chakra he had sent through the Shinju. The sheer multitude of emotions had threatened to overwhelm him. Not that anyone could do much against the way they were held within the cocoons of the Shinju, as none were able to access their chakra at the moment. So, whether they wanted to or not, no one had a choice. They simply had to listen to him. After waking them, however, he had continued his message as quickly and clearly as possible, considering how he knew that Ino would not survive it if he talked for too long. He estimated that he had covered for about 95% of the chakra cost, while she had Ajisai, Tsunade, and Shizen helping her by transferring chakra to her, and yet the 4 of them were barely able to cope with that small fraction of the chakra-draining communique. He granted himself a short moment of awe, amazed by the power he wielded, allowing them to catch their breaths. "Are you okay?" He looked at the women. Ino and Ajisai were flat on their backs, too exhausted to keep standing up, while Shizen was practically sleeping on Tsunade's shoulder. The Senju was the only one of the 4 who still seemed to have some energy left. "They'll be fine, after a good night's rest at least," she smiled. "Good, then I'll take down the Shinju." But first, he expertly flashed through a sequence of 5 hand seals he knew all too well. Mokuton, Shichuka no Jutsu, would release, 4-pillar house technique, usually a small 2-floor building would grow. But with the excess of chakra he currently had at his disposal he could create a far greater building. Large enough to house himself and the 6 women, while still having a dozen spare rooms. "Conan, Swearin, could you help Bachan to get these sleepyheads inside? I'll go and wake up the remainder of the world's population, K?" "Yeah, you do that." Swearin shook her head with a deadpan expression. The continuous state of disbelief at what he did, combined with the careless way that he said what he was going to do, left her too stunned to retort properly. "I bet few would have smacked him on the head or something," she thought sadly. "I'm home. How did it go?" Ajisai called from the kitchen. "Meh, just as boring as all the others," Naruto muttered from the living room. "You'd think Kuma would stop sending these idiotic would-be assassins." This was their 5th squad of Jonin. At the very least, they could give up on the idea that they're able to sneak towards us without being detected. "Their tenacity is admirable," Ajisai giggled. She idly wondered how many people would have this sort of discussion. Most would be terrified if their loved ones had to face dozens of elite shinobi, and yet she didn't feel worried at all. Now that Black Zetsu is gone and the Jubi are dealt with, It just feels like everything is perfect, as if there's nothing left that could threaten us. Smells great. Naruto walked into the kitchen. He had just taken off his boots and robes, cleaning them of the dust that had gotten on them while he had been fighting the stubborn Kumonin. He wondered how many more he needed to send back before they got the message. Then again, stupid, I should have considered this sooner. After I take away their chakra, they can't travel at high speeds. So it is likely that none of the previous idiots have reached their village yet. Ugh. I guess I'll have to visit Kumo tomorrow. It's the rabbit you caught, seasoned with the spices and some other stuff Jiraiya had stored. Peeking into the pan, his eyes widened. Fried rabbit ramen? He leaned in and kissed her on her cheek. Just when I thought I couldn't possibly love you any more than I did. Sycophant. Ajisai giggled, feeling happy when his arms enveloped her while he stood behind her, his chin resting in a bed of orange hair. It's just improvisation, though. No clue if it'll taste good. You won't believe how much sealed food he gathered. It's a bit annoying that he didn't label any of those scrolls. Well, after you unsealed this entire house, I can't say I'm easily surprised by him sealing away food, Naruto admitted. Of course, some of the things they had found were less entertaining. Ajisai, for example, was rather disgusted by the amount of research material that Jiraiya had hoarded, the enormous collection of pornography, as well as pictures of scantily clad or outright naked women, all taken by the peeping pervert himself, was something she didn't really appreciate. Though Naruto thought that the man's dedication deserved at least some credit. Personally, he intended to investigate that particular storage hall a bit better. In private, regardless of the man's perverted quirks, they were both happy to live in this house, as it had a far homier feeling to it than any of Naruto's constructs had. While it, at first, felt as if they were trespassing in the man's property, they had quickly reached the decision that it was a good way to honor his sacrifice by living in a place that was essentially a monument to his memory. Erosenin was an odd fellow, but I never thought that that big scroll he always carried with him would contain literally everything he owned. Don't be sad, Naruto-kun, Ajisai said softly, after her fiancé had fallen silent. He wanted you to be free, to be happy. You've read the letter he wrote for you, his resolution and last will. We should honor him, and be thankful for what he did, not just for you, but also for your father. Among the many things Jiraiya had kept sealed within his scroll, the most personal items were the letters which the man had written. He had planned his own death, so he had made all the preparations he could. He planned not just to say his final goodbyes to those he cared about, but he also left detailed instructions and messages for the members of his network. He had, after all, kept one of the largest independent information networks in the shinobi world, effectively acting as Konoha's spymaster. It was humbling to see how the man had kept his focus on his duties, even in the face of the terrible fate he had chosen. I am aware, Naruto assured her. But until I have freed his soul, I won't feel happy about his sacrifice. Hell, even after I know he's free, I'll miss him. I really wish I had gotten a chance to know him sooner. I didn't even know he was my godfather. Free him? Ajisai frowned. Yeah, I told you about how I met my mom, right? She explained to me how the Shiki Fujin worked, and how I'd be able to free my dad's soul. You know, that whole Fuinjutsu thing was a kinjutsu from the Uzumaki clan, he smiled weakly. If it's me, that mask will be a lot safer to use. I'm not going to let you get away from me again, you hear? Ajisai turned around and poked at his chest. Jiraiya-sama didn't give up his life for you to end up in the belly of the Shinigami. I know, and it won't happen, Naruto promised, dragging her into a firm embrace. Did you really think Ka-san would have wanted my soul to end up like that? Have faith, my love. It's not that I don't believe in you, Naruto-kun. But, after all that happened, after everything that went wrong, I find it difficult not to get scared when you say you intend to mess around with the Shinigami, Ajisai confessed. It's not like I doubt you, but you should, the Uzumaki chuckled. Considering the crazy plan Kurama and I cooked up, I think it would be pretty normal to doubt me. I know I do, as long as the majority of the villages are willing to cooperate. Even if I more or less ordered the world's leaders to go to the summit, we can't exactly achieve what we want on our own power. We need them to cooperate willingly, Naruto agreed. This whole endeavor would have been doomed to fail if I had tried to do it all on my own. Just look at Kaguya. You're better than her. Alone I'm not, but I have you at my side. He kissed her on her forehead. You've seen how I was before you. Yes, you're definitely a sycophant. She gently punched him in the stomach. Let's get something to eat. Yes, dear, he said in mock submission, earning himself another playful punch. Quietly, just enjoying each other's presence, the two decided to sit at the porch. From here they could see the beginnings of how they envisioned reshaping the destroyed landscape, with several forests added by Naruto, and a large lake created by Ajisai, who was starting to like Shinra Tensei more and more. They had agreed to name the lake after her fallen friend, Fu, or perhaps they would name a planned river for her. They hadn't made up their minds about that just yet. Lake Fu didn't sound too shabby either. Fried rabbit ramen. I think I'll go hunt us some more rabbit from now on. Naruto let out a content sigh when he finally finished his meal, which was practically 5 times the amount of food that Ajisai had consumed. She really wondered how he could eat that much, especially when it concerned ramen. We're not going to eat ramen every day, Naruto-kun. Ajisai looked at him, giggling when he pulled off an utterly horrified expression. And I won't fall for the puppy eye method either. But, ramen. It's ramen, he whined. It's the food of the gods. We got a letter from Tsunade today. She smiled at his antics, but ultimately decided to change the subject. He had become far more carefree ever since they'd started to live together like this, after the others had returned to their respective villages. Apparently there are 2 clan leaders who insisted on joining her, as well as 2 village elders. Geez, if this keeps up I'll have to increase the size of the assembly hall again, the Jinchuriki muttered. Oh well, I did specifically say the Gakage and other leaders, so I should have expected this. Do you think they'll attempt to stop the assembly? Of course, Naruto chuckled humorlessly. If Kurama's accounts of our history have shown me one thing, it would be that we're always inclined to create and maintain conflict. Right now, we threaten the very foundation of the economy that keeps the hidden villages going. We'll be their number 1 enemy, so yes, they'll try to stop us. Well, at least it will be a good opportunity to show the rest of our visitors that you're not joking around, and that they should not be underestimating me. They both wondered how the assembly would go. Would they be forced to subjugate the villages, or would they listen to reason? Much would depend on how the Gakage, the leaders of the 5 strongest villages, would act. The support of Konan, on behalf of Amigakure, would be a given, but the others. Neither of the young adults wished to wage another war, even though they were both well aware that it would be painfully short. With the power Naruto had at his disposal, even the 5 villages united would not stand a chance. To make the matters even more unfair, Ajisai's chakra reserves just kept on growing. Naruto didn't tell her, but he knew this was Kurama's silent thanks for her efforts to make him whole again. They watched the sun set over the ruins of the former territory of Takigakure. As the temperature began to lower, Ajisai scooted closer to Naruto, who held her in a one-armed embrace. Do you think we did the right thing? Naruto suddenly asked from out of the blue. With Ero Sennin, I mean, he clarified. For what he did, he deserves some kind of monument, so that none will ever forget him. Like the Valley of the End. You heard Tsunade, Ajisai sighed. Jiraiya never really had a place he called his. He affiliated with Konoha for most of his life, and spent a lot of time there as well, but in his heart he was a wanderer. You know well enough that he now rests at his true home. After the conflict had settled down, they had been forced to decide the final resting place of Jiraiya. Naruto, as he could practically feel everyone in the entire world, was already aware that the man had perished, but not how. It had saddened him when he heard of the man's incredible sacrifice. Myobokuzen was his true home. Naruto couldn't refute the words of Shima and Fukasaku. He, Ajisai, and Tsunade had been invited to the sacred mountain for the small ceremony. Toads weren't exactly too hung up about formalities, so the burial had merely been a short ritual. Is that what haunts you? Ajisai eventually asked, having observed his pained expression for a little while. He had these nightmares of which he barely spoke. It was something done to him by Kaguya, which left him frustrated and enraged when he relived it. That too, Naruto admitted. Like said, I really wish I had gotten more time with him, that I could have known him a bit better. He was my godfather, my only family, after all. Too. Ajisai had tried to be subtle up to that point, but she really wished to know what bugged him so much. Some silent curses were muttered under his breath, as Naruto realized he had misspoken. Naruto-kun? I told you that Kaguya tried something to break me, Naruto admitted. That's what still gives me nightmares. What is it? You know, if you don't talk about it, it would. I didn't want to talk about it because I was afraid that it would hurt you, he sighed, resigning himself to his fate. She was right, he had to talk about it. Keeping secrets would only be another mistake. You know how Kakuzu and Zetsu effectively killed my old self, right? I told you how my dad interfered and sealed my memories, before either Kurama or Zetsu could completely corrupt me. Well, that led to a bit of a duality within myself. A conflict of sorts, between my old self and my new self. Kaguya attempted to trap me by making me live in an illusionary world that I would envision as perfect. And? Ajisai blinked, not understanding the problem. You broke free, so why does it give you nightmares? The world I lived in for a while was the dream my old self had. I was Hokage, had married Ino, had a son, the full Monty, he grimaced. I realized quickly enough that something was off, but it wasn't that easy to realize what was going on. At that point I had no idea I was trapped in an illusion. I did not remember anything from before, other than what seemed to be some kind of vague dream. It would have been the perfect illusion to tie anyone down, anyone but me. It is ironic, considering that Zetsu is responsible for what I became, and in the process also enabled me to escape Kaguya's perfect illusion. So how did you break from that illusion? It was too powerful to be broken by any normal way. Tsukuyami probably compares to a regular genjutsu like how your Shinra Tensei would compare to a blunt kunai, Naruto shrugged. The thing that did it, though, was my ring. He smiled while holding up the wooden ring on his finger. I knew the wedding ring I wore in the illusion was wrong, and I kept focusing on it for so long that I eventually broke free. But why would that cause you nightmares? Every time I dream about that life I could have had if Zetsu had not screwed me over. Each time I see those eyes, he sighed dejectedly. Each time I see those desperate eyes, begging me to stay, so hurt when I said that he wasn't real, those eyes haunt me in my dreams. Minato-chan was so innocent, so filled with a longing for me, his father, that betrayal. I know it was just an illusion, but it felt so real. So horribly real. He swallowed away the lump that he felt in his throat, but I guess that in time that pain will fade. It was just an illusion, even if my stupid brains don't seem to process that fact properly. Naruto shook himself out of his stupor. That all was the dream of my old life. This is the dream I have now. You are. When I first saw you in that Akatsuki cloak, I never imagined you to be such a hopeless romantic. Ajisai smiled contently. First time we met I didn't wear a thing, did I? He kissed her on her cheek. Now that I think about it, we should rename this country to Ero no Kuni, Land of the Perverts, in Jiraiya's honor. Don't ruin the mood with jokes, Ajisai whispered before uttering words that were music to Naruto's ears. Just take off those clothes. Just after he had turned around, a kunai landed on what was supposed to be a soft spot in his neck. It would have worked on anyone but him. Naruto looked back at his assailant in complete indifference, watching as the visibly terrified shinobi who held the broken kunai took a step back. A good try, but ultimately fruitless, Naruto remarked. I do not know whether it is bravery or stupidity, but apparently I do have to make another example. The shinobi, a kunoichi from Kirigakure, sank to her knees. That kunai had been coated in chakra, with enough power to decapitate a bear, yet it had simply snapped when it hit his skin. He didn't even have a scratch on him. How can you be so calm about this? One of the Kirigakure delegates demanded. Judging by the distance the man kept between himself and Tsurumi Mei, Naruto guessed that he was part of the rebel faction. About what? The number of foreign shinobi that are gathered here? Naruto replied calmly. I thought I already made this clear, but fine, to me it does not matter who comes here, nor how many. Even if all 5 villages united against me, at this point it would not matter. Any form of conflict is futile, as you could see. This is one problem none of you can solve with violence. She's just shown you that the current leadership of Kirigakure cannot be trusted. That is a lie, Mei growled. She was not one of mine. Could you stop this childish bickering? It's making my head hurt, Naruto sighed. I told you how I would deal with this. As the Kumo delegation will undoubtedly be able to testify. After all, they've sent the largest number of victims. Faster than even Mei's eyes could follow, Naruto moved to stand in front of the offending kunoichi, his palm landing flat on her forehead. That's what I said I would do. He turned around, ushering the others to follow him into the assembly hall he had created for the occasion. Mei blinked, and then turned to her Umbu guard to confirm what she thought that just happened. As she no longer has any chakra at her disposal, the veteran stammered. Not wanting to offend Naruto in any way, they all moved quickly to enter the assembly hall, where Naruto pointed them at the section he had reserved for the lot of them. Even the elder who had chosen to partake in this journey had hurried. Each and every one of them moved around the defeated, now former, kunoichi as if they feared that her suddenly inability to wield chakra might be as contagious as the plague itself. Fools, Naruto sighed. In the various delegations he had already disposed of several would-be assassins. People who tried their luck, in spite of the warnings he had set in place. Truthfully, he disliked that he had to do this, but he agreed with Kurama that he could not show any weakness at this stage. Their plans could work with or without the hidden villages, but they, as well as Ajisai, had agreed that it would be easier if the shinobi system was kept. Removing the villages from power would throw the entire world into unnecessary chaos, as conflict would be an inevitable part of the world finding a new status quo. Still, when people acted, Naruto was forced to respond. Not every delegation had violent intentions. Ironically, the group from Kumo hadn't tried a thing. Naruto guessed that it was because they already lost several squads of their best jonin during the past 2 weeks. The group from Konoha had not tried anything either, at least not in terms of violence. They had tried to claim him as one of their own, due to his history as a Konoha nin. He had shot down that line of reasoning, to the point where he had suggested that he would not mind being registered in the bingo books as a missing nin, and by proxy as an enemy of Konoha. They had been annoying, but at least Tsunade had managed to rein the elders in before they said something too stupid. Naruto had idly played with the thought of taking away Koharu's chakra, but ultimately resisted the temptation. The condescending old hag even had the nerve of suggesting that his actions might put Ajisai in danger. Well, it was at that moment that Tsunade cut her off. Threats, no matter how well they veiled them, would not work against Naruto. While Naruto had nothing against Tsunade, and felt the contrary actually, he would not hesitate to crush Konoha if it needed to be done for the sake of a peaceful world. The delegations from Iwa and Suna were far easier to him. The acting Tsuchikage had expressed her thanks several times, although the elders that had followed in her wake had shown far less gratitude, and assured him that as long as she held any influence she would support him. It amused him, as she didn't even know his plans, but apparently the young woman shared his dream of a peaceful world. The Kazekage, Temari, was like-minded. She thanked him, and was glad he had emerged victorious, though she warned him that not everyone within her village was a supporter of peace. Konan had, unsurprisingly, come as the leader of Amigakure, with only Swearin at her side. Of course, the Konoha delegation that had arrived later than the duo from AIM had contested her presence, claiming that AIM was now their territory. Naruto had shot down that claim, without leaving any room for discussion. Kumo's remarkably peaceful delegation had been led by a woman named Mabui, an attractive dark-skinned woman with light gray hair. It had amused him that she thanked him for not killing the idiots who acted without orders, as she had put it. He had the feeling that she was an intelligent one, and a skilled politician, much unlike the hot-headed Yondaime Reikage. Mabui was flanked by a couple of young guards, of whom one, a male of about Naruto's age, had recently been promoted to the rank of Jonin. While the level-headed Oma claimed that it was due to the large loss in the Jonin ranks, Mabui had smiled and offhandedly mentioned that Oma would be a good candidate to fill the currently empty seat of Reikage. Aside from the major villages there were also groups, although much smaller, from the less influential villages. The foolish leader of Ishigekyo no Sato, village hidden in stones, had attempted to bribe him with large amounts of gold if he raised their village's status. Naruto suspected that the man was a skilled censor, even though he didn't really amount to much of a shinobi outside that aspect. A single jonin from Tanigakure, hidden in the valleys, arrived, stating that he acted under the authority of his village's leader, and apologized on that man's behalf. Apparently the actual leader was too old, too scared. Ajisai had corrected the man, once he was out of hearing range. Naruto was inclined to agree with her. Kusa's delegation had entered without incident, much like the stoic leader from Tetsu no Kuni. If Naruto remembered it right, that man had been named Mifune. The proverbial icing on the cake came from the representatives from Shimagakure no Sato, village hidden in frost. The idiots had tried to take Ajisai as a hostage. Naruto had been impressed by her display. Her mastery of the Deva path had improved, but it seemed like she had also started to figure out how the human path worked. The fools had then realized that Ajisai wasn't as easy a target as they had initially thought, and had made an attempt to escape. Well, those fools would get back home, even if it would take them quite a while longer. Traveling the civilian way, as Naruto had taken away their chakra, was far slower. With Ajisai at his side, Naruto moved to the center of the assembly hall. Clad in black, with pure white robes atop, he still looked the same. Those who could sense or, in the case of Hyuga Hayashi, see chakra, noticed that these robes were made out of pure chakra. To them, Naruto was akin to a bright light in the deep dark, the sole source of warmth in a cold winter night. Ajisai, clad in a white dress, was definitely no weakling, as she would likely give any of the Gakage a run for their money, likely even beat them. But next to Naruto, she fell short. She didn't exactly mind it, though, knowing that the comparison was simply unfair. Those who were present mostly seemed to fear Naruto, as many of them had by now seen his power firsthand, leaving her as a more friendly option. Good cop, bad cop, Naruto had joked, clearing his throat, hinting to his guests to be quiet and get seated. Naruto felt slightly annoyed that some of the squabbling parties did not shut up. Slightly releasing the chakra he suppressed from their senses was enough to scare them into silence. Now it would start. The next minutes, or possibly hours, would likely determine the fate of the world. Would the plan be implemented using the easy way, or would they be forced to go down the hard way? Both hid their anxiety, Ajisai probably better than Naruto, as they turned to the assembled leaders of the hidden villages. Good. Now, to begin, I shall reintroduce myself. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto bowed, almost mockingly, before continuing. At my side is Ajisai, bearer of the famed Rinnegan, and former kunoichi of Amigekyo no Sato. As for myself, my former allegiance was with Kanohigaku no Sato, although circumstances forced me to leave that village several years ago. Mabui, acting leader of Kumogakure, stood up hesitantly, and spoke when Naruto nodded. Are you presenting yourself as a missing nin? Technically, I suppose I am, yes, Naruto answered the politely asked question with equal politeness. Inwardly, he felt relieved that they started off in such a civil manner. As for the how and why of my defection from that village, I will need to explain some of the events that have led to the current situation. That might take some time, and I must ask you all to refrain from asking any questions until I finish my story. Is that acceptable? Several people nodded, some muttered their assent, while some, such as Konan and Tsunade, merely smiled at him. Although the look in Tsunade's eyes was still sad, what spurred him to make a mental note of having a good conversation with the woman once this was all over? He'd probably need to grow a sake bar around here as well, just for her. Very well, Naruto inclined his head. Some might know me as the son of Konoha's Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, and his wife Uzumaki Kushina. Others might know me as the Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Yoko, the nine-tailed fox. Due to who and what I am, or better said, the entity that was sealed within me, an organization named Akatsuki targeted me. As you are all probably aware, this organization aimed to gather all the Biju with the intent to use them as a weapon that would force the world to stop waging wars. Born out of suffering and loss, their original goals might have been noble once, but unfortunately they had long since been corrupted, twisting the organization into something very, very dangerous. To explain what went wrong, and who was ultimately responsible for this, we need to go further back in history. So far back in time that many of you will discard the story as a legend or mere fiction, but I assure you that what I tell you is the truth. 1,000 years ago, mankind was still unaware of the existence of chakra. In this era before the shinobi, many countries were involved in a war so horrible that it led to one woman, a princess, gaining the desire to end this senseless violence, he told, as he, Kurama, and Ajisai had agreed that leaving out the truth about the Otsutsuki clan was for the best. The news that there was some kind otherworldly race of superhumans would likely not fare well. In order to achieve her goal, the woman consumed the fruit of the Shinju, the divine tree that grew as it gathered energy from our world. This princess was the first to wield the energy we all commonly refer to as chakra, and brought peace to the world. No army could resist her might, thus the nations were subdued for some time. Her name was Otsutsuki Kaguya. Kaguya's overwhelming power changed the world as they knew it, so mankind fell to its knees and worshipped her as a goddess, a falsehood that she eventually started to believe as well. While she ruled mankind, Kaguya had two sons, both born with a similar power she had. The historians amongst you might know the elder of these two brothers as the Rikudo Sennin. To clarify the importance of this man to our history, the sage of the six paths is the one who taught mankind how to use chakra. Before he did such, however, he and his brother faced an enemy that was far superior to them in power. Otsutsuki Kaguya, regardless of her original intentions, had grown weary of mankind's constant hunger for conflict. In spite of their worship, humanity failed to realize that Kaguya only wished for peace, and could not accept that her subjects continued their pointless strife. She saw herself as a goddess, and by divine right she decided that mankind did not deserve to exist. In order to wipe out our race, she merged her powers with that of the Shinju and captured a great portion of the world's population. As she sought to replace them, rather than just creating a massacre, she changed the humans she had captured into mindless white creatures that were named Zetsu, beings without individuality or personality, aside from a sinister desire to obey Kaguya's each and every command. Looking around, Naruto smiled softly when he saw various people. Shikaku, for instance, recognized the description of white Zetsu. Many amongst you have been unfortunate enough to meet one of the white Zetsu, although I suspect only few realize that you have. The white Zetsu had the ability to perfectly imitate those whom they stole chakra from. As such, they have played a large role in the schemes of Akatsuki, but let us return to the time of their origins. For whatever reason, Kaguya was weakened severely after she committed this horrendous act of warping humans into her puppets. In this tiny window of opportunity, her sons, enraged by what she had done, struck her down. However, since the Shinju itself was an undying entity, they found themselves unable to kill Kaguya. Because of this, the elder son, the Rikudo Sennin, sealed the creature which Kaguya had become, the Jubi, within himself. Even though the Jubi was immortal, the Rikudo Sennin found a way to divide its power into the 9 Biju, while he sealed away the remaining husk of the Jubi at his deathbed. Yes, this is the origin of the Biju, creatures older and nobler than any of you would ever have thought. They are not the mindless demons you think they are, for the lack of a better word, the children of the first and arguably greatest shinobi of all time. As I mentioned earlier, after the defeat of Kaguya, the Rikudo Sennin spread the power he wielded over mankind, teaching man about the many ways chakra could be used. He even used his powers to grant certain individuals abilities that would reside within their blood, giving birth to the Kekkai Genkai that we still see to this day. He hoped that with this power, mankind would find a way to evolve beyond its previous condition. After all, he taught mankind the use of chakra so that they could connect to each other. Sadly, his lessons were quickly forgotten, and the power he had granted to them was used for warfare rather than peace. In his desire for peace, the Rikudo Sennin unintentionally made the fights even more gruesome. He taught his sons what he could, hoping that they could do what he could not, and bring peace to the world. Alas, there was one thing which the Rikudo Sennin had failed to see. In the instant that Kaguya had realized that her sons had defeated her, the short moment before she was sealed within her eldest son, the woman created another entity. As Kaguya had little time and power to spare, this third son was a weak and fragile being, but like her it would never perish due to the passing of time. This creature would later be known as Black Zetsu, an entity created for a singular purpose, to resurrect Otsutsuki Kaguya. It was the instigator of a conflict between the sons of the Rikudo Sennin. These two sons were the fathers of two famous clans. The younger was the first Senju, while the elder son was the first person to wield the Sharingan, the founder of the Uchiha clan. Even though it was relatively powerless, Black Zetsu was a cunning creature, and it made the elder son of the Rikudo Sennin the first victim of its schemes. Though over the centuries to follow, many of the first Uchiha's descendants fell victim to Zetsu's manipulations as well. To Black Zetsu, the Uchiha were the perfect tools, as their Sharingan gave them the power to control the 9 Biju. However, somehow, Black Zetsu had made a miscalculation and lost its most valuable tools. Thanks to Uchiha Itachi massacring his own clan, Zetsu was forced to find another tool for his plans. Unfortunately, I was that tool. It led to the death of my sensei and my teammates, and nearly my own demise as well. The sole reason for my survival is that Black Zetsu infused my mutilated body with the tissue of one of the countless white Zetsu that had been created by Kaguya, centuries before. Black Zetsu's plan succeeded, but only partly. I did gain the Mokuton Kekkai Genkai, which made me the worst enemy of any Biju, and I temporarily lost my memories as well, but I did not become the loyal subordinate Zetsu wished me to be. Still, Akatsuki managed to capture one Jinchuriki after the other, extracting the Biju, and sealing the poor creatures into the husk of the Jubi. How they retrieved it, I do not know. I do know, however, that people had looked down at Jinchuriki to such an extent that only few bothered to examine who had taken them, or why. Some within the audience fidgeted slightly as his icy blue-eyed glare fell over them. In the end, I too fell to one of Black Zetsu's many traps, and lost a large portion of the Kyubi's chakra. It was a large enough portion for Black Zetsu to awaken the Jubi when the Hokage, along with a select number of shinobi from Konoha and Amagekyo, attempted to stop him. He gestured at Tsunade and Konan. All others had, at that point, fallen for Black Zetsu's machinations. Using the numerous white Zetsu that fell under its command, Black Zetsu flawlessly infiltrated each and every organization, managing to divide and cripple every armed force in our world. In the end, Black Zetsu succeeded in bringing back the Shinju at full force. The Shinju spawned, and it did what Kaguya ordered it to do: capture every living being and retrieve the chakra that she had lost. It trapped you in those cocoons, and lulled you into a sleep you were not supposed to wake from, while it slowly drained you of your chakra. The sole reason you are still alive is that the Godame Hokage and her ally Konan, the current leader of Amagekyo, joined forces and disrupted the plans of Black Zetsu. The disruption nearly failed, as none were aware of the history behind the Jubi, but their efforts were enough for me to survive the confrontation with Otsutsuki Kaguya. Without them, and Ajisai next to me, the Kyubi would have been completely absorbed by the Jubi, and I would not have been able to stop Kaguya's resurrection. When Naruto fell silent for a moment, Temari stood up. If I may ask, what did you mean by Kaguya's resurrection, and how did you end up being the Jinchuriki of all 9 Biju? Hamura, one of the village elders from Konoha, spoke up. Judging by the amount of chakra I can sense within you, your claim does not seem to be idle boasting, but dash. And, when a third person tried to ask a question, Naruto put up his hand. To answer the both questions, Black Zetsu sealed the Jubi in me. Even at this very moment I am working at extracting the chakra from the 9 Biju from it. Then why? Calm down and let me explain, Naruto sighed. As I told you all before, the Jubi is a combination of powers. On one end it was the Shinju, the immortal god tree that grew 1,000 years ago. The other half of the creature was made up out of Otsutsuki Kaguya. So, with the Shinju out here, capturing the world's population, I suppose you can guess who tried to take over my mind and my body. But that was 1,000 years ago, Terumi sputtered. She couldn't still be alive, could she? She tied herself to the Shinju, Naruto shrugged. So by extension, she could not die due to the passing of time either. Her essence, her ego, ended up within the husk of the Jubi, the thing that was also known as the Gedomazo. As her son sealed and divided the chakra of the Jubi, she lost her power. But when Akatsuki, misguided by Black Zetsu's manipulations, managed to retrieve all 9 parts of the Jubi's chakra, Otsutsuki Kaguya also woke up. However, due to the actions from Tsunade, Konin, and Ajisai, the process of awakening the Jubi was slightly rushed. I dare say that this was what saved me, as I assumed that Kaguya was not at her full power when I faced her. Tell me, can you people sense my chakra? Several nods or other affirming gestures and words came from the audience. My current power, vast as it may seem, is limited due to my efforts to dismantle the Shinju. If I were to be serious, I estimate that my chakra reserves would at least triple in size. Naruto deliberately left out his ability to gather natural energy, as he didn't think it would be wise to give these people too much information. As powerful as I might appear to you, Otsutsuki Kaguya was even more powerful. It was only due to her arrogance that she underestimated a specific jutsu of mine, which led to the destruction of her ego. For all intents and purposes she can be considered dead, although her power, the power that she had stolen by eating the Shinju's fruit, still lingers in me. This leaves me pondering what I should do, now that the responsibility of her power has fallen to me. Obviously, I ruled out the option of turning every one of you into Zetsu, as she intended to do. I would, if possible, avoid the options of massacre and subjugation. Regardless, with the knowledge I have gained, as well as everything that I have observed, I have come to agree with both Kaguya and the Rikudo Sennin that things need to change. It is why I created my plans, together with the Kyubi and Ajisai. He gestured at his fiancée. Still, our plans would work out better if we had cooperation. It is why I called for this summit before I freed everyone from the grasp of the Shinju. That little tidbit took a little while to digest, for those who were gathered. Naruto had deliberately minimized the mentions of Kurama's influence on the plans they made, due to a point that Kurama had raised. The shinobi were afraid of the Biju. They would not be eager to trust the embodiment of malice. What Naruto proposed would already create enough friction, without involving the misguided prejudices the shinobi had about the Biju. Yes, a certain amount of fear was deemed useful, but too much of it would derail this summit. Power does not confer to you the right to decide how we live our lives, one of the jonin from Kumogakure growled. Even if it is under the pretense of cooperation, what you truly ask for is our subjugation. As someone who has lived in Amigakure for years, I find such a statement quite ironic. Ajisai remained calm, though her glare, with courtesy of the Rinnegan, was enough to silence the easily unnerved jonin. The larger villages have always waged their wars on the soil of the minor nations that were stuck in between their borders. Each time our leaders attempted to negotiate in a peaceful manner, the answer was the same. No matter which of your villages we tried to negotiate with, strength is important, but that alone does not determine the right to rule, Koharu, the village elder of Konoha, stated. If one decides to rule merely by power, it would become a dictatorship. Though after all you have told us, I would not be surprised if you would fancy yourself a god now. Your wicked old tongue will truly get you in trouble one of these days. Naruto was slightly amused by the old woman. He had to give it to her, she hid her fear quite well. The fluctuations in her chakra were still obvious enough. They were far less obvious than the signs he felt in many others, what he saw as a testament of her former skill. I have no interest in ruling anyone or anything. I don't want to become an emperor, god, supreme Kage, or whatever. What you do in your villages is up to you. My sole interest lies in what I already stated to be my goal, a more peaceful world. Then how do you intend to create such a world? Tsunade pulled Koharu by her arm, roughly forcing her to get back on her seat. The Senju was genuinely curious as to what he truly wished to become. He had hinted that he and Kurama had talked about this quite a lot, but he had been unwilling to fully reveal the details of their plans. You told me you did not want to return to your home village, that you wished to remain independent. Why? Because if I were to be partial, I would never be able to properly mediate in the conflicts you are going to create in the future, the Jinchuriki chuckled. I have told you all that I stopped the Jubi from destroying this world. The logical next step would be that I intend to stop you lot from continuing the Jubi's work. With the incessant conflicts between your villages and nations, it would only be a matter of time until another Akatsuki would rise. You can't blame us for the actions of those lunatics. Asuna Elder barked. I just did, and I will continue to do so, Naruto deadpan. The leader of Akatsuki, Pain, was someone who was born and raised amidst the carnage of the Second Shinobi World War. The actions of Hanzo of Amigakure and Shimura Danzo of Konohagakure pushed that boy to the point where he thought that causing immeasurable destruction was the only way to stop the endless conflicts. Hashigaki Kisame, he gestured in the direction of the Kirigakure delegation, was disillusioned when he realized that he lived in a world filled with lies. Kakuzu of Takigakure was originally a shinobi of unmatched loyalty, yet found himself betrayed by a village which threw him away for their own gains. Need I continue? Did you not state that Zetsu was responsible? Mabui, the chief representative of Kumogakure, questioned. That he corrupted Akatsuki? Zetsu warped its cause, Mifune, the leader of the samurai of Tetsu no Kuni, reminded her. Many of its members were known long before Akatsuki emerged. Indeed, Naruto inclined his head slightly, thanking the stoic and, even to him, nearly unreadable man. It was obvious that the samurai was guarded, but he didn't radiate the same mixture of fear and anger as most others in the room did. Black Zetsu orchestrated the death of my parents, Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato. It caused the fall of the Uchiha clan. It manipulated the organization Akatsuki for its goals, made friends and allies tear at each other's throats. Zetsu nearly brought the world to ruin. And its crimes are not only from recent times. Countless people have died throughout the centuries, including my own clan, all due to the actions of the Zetsu. And if we look closely, even Zetsu is not really to blame. After all, it was Otsutsuki Kaguya who was responsible for creating Black Zetsu the way it was, Naruto explained in further detail. To return to the original question, yes, Zetsu corrupted Akatsuki. But Akatsuki did not raise or train any of its members. Akatsuki recruited the strongest missing nin available. Their members were already shaped by the villages they hailed from. That did not excuse their crimes, the Suna elder insisted. Blaming the villages for their decisions is illogical. Of course it is logical, Naruto frowned. It didn't feel like those gathered believed what he said. It was worrying. If they rejected his views, if they rejected the plans they had created. The gathered shinobi seemed to be afraid, fear guiding most of them, afraid of him forcing them to be subjugated to him, rather than hoping for cooperation. The shinobi world, of which these people were its representatives, needed to acknowledge its errors. But if the majority rather stuck to its ways, they'd force his hand, and he would need to impose change in a more violent manner than he wanted to. Still, my wishes are of little importance. Now is the time, now is the chance to change things. I can't allow myself to fail due to indecisiveness. So he kept talking, in hope that some would be swayed. People are shaped by their experiences, and their actions have been logical consequences of the lives they have suffered. I have a being inside me that has seen this process happen over and over again, for centuries. Through his words, I came to understand why the Biju look down upon our kind. We are violent and short-sighted. Our children are spoon-fed with war and armed conflict, and with each generation the cycle of hatred would only escalate further, with each act of aggression eliciting an equally violent response. With the upbringing they had, no one ever second-guessed their own part in that cycle. Everyone sees violence as a normal occurrence, after all. As for their elders, whether it is the narrow-minded grudges, the pathetic dependency on traditions, the delusion that only their actions are just, or pure and simple greed, I do not care. The bottom line is that mankind always continues to be in conflict. I can agree with that, Kuratsuchi said on behalf of Iwagakure. First we had the Reikage murder Artsukage, after which Kumo attacked us in retaliation because we took down their treacherous leader, and then Konohagakure continued to backstab everyone in an attempt to destroy both of its enemies. I agree with Naruto. Someone has to put a stop to this senseless violence. I concur, Tamari, Kase of Sunagakure said bluntly. She completely ignored the sputtering elders behind her. Especially now that Naruto has shown us how deep Zetsu's plotting went, we should all be able to see that this is the moment to let go of our old grudges and work towards a better future. As the Godame Hokage of Konohagekure, I agree with the Kazekage and the Tsuchikage. Tsunade glared at her company, especially the two unhappy village elders. All of this sounds noble. Shikaku ignored his Kage. Yet incredibly naive as well. What makes you think that you can keep the peace, no matter how strong you are? Why would that peace last after you die of old age? I am human. It means that, ultimately, I am flawed as well. Even though Kurama, whom you all know as the Kyuubi, is sealed within me, I still have flaws that are inherent to humankind. We are born neither good nor evil, but have the potential to do both. It is, however, the circumstances in which we develop and grow up that shape us. As such, I am as much a part of this cycle of hatred as you all. But we cannot think in terms of blame. Long before Kaguya walked this earth, our kind was already waging its wars. Kaguya tried to put that violence to a halt by changing mankind into mindless slaves, and she failed. The Rikudo Sennin tried to put that violence to a halt by entrusting mankind the tools and abilities that could lead to mutual understanding, and he failed. Both extremes of the spectrum led to failure, so I cannot have either complete faith or a complete lack of faith. We need to establish a middle ground. I talked about neutrality, because I wish to establish a court. I will act as a judge here, backed by a millennium worth of experience from the Biju, backed by those I have yet to train in the art of senjutsu, and mediate in the larger conflicts that are yet to come. If I completely removed the necessity for conflict from mankind, we would all lose our humanity and become beings such as the Zetsu. If I, as the Rikudo Sennin once did, decide to teach you how to better your ways, you would only corrupt my teachings and continue the path of conflict. Children do not grow up in a day. It takes years for them to realize that their place in this world cannot be taken for granted. And until their dying day they may seek to understand their path, though never find a true answer. Humanity, at large, will need more time to grow up than any single human. We are not naive enough to believe that your grudges will vanish instantly. If the cycle of hatred could be broken that easily, better men and women who came before me could have done it. Thus, we choose to restrict the violence in this world, and we will act as a neutral party that mediates in time of need. With the power of the legendary Dojutsu, the Rinnegan, combined with my Senjutsu and the might of the 9 Biju, we could easily conquer the world. None would be able to withstand us. But that is not our wish. We wish for peace. And peace cannot be established by might alone, Naruto concluded. As for how I plan to let this situation last beyond my lifespan, in due time I will take students who will be taught how to connect with nature, to become sages as I am. Beyond that, I will liberate the 9 Biju, who will aid me and my successors. So you will not return our Biju to us? Without the Biju the balance of power would be disrupted. There will be no more need for Jinchuriki. They serve no purpose if there is no war, nor would they maintain any balance. After all, they remain a neutral party. Beyond that, I would like to reiterate my point that the Biju are not tools or objects, but rather living beings like us. I dare say that they are even better than us, considering how they are far older and wiser. Naruto chided the woman from Kumogakure. You just expect us to accept that? A young kunoichi from Kumogakure, a fiery redhead, blurted out. Everyone has lost in the wars of the past, Ajisai spoke up clearly. But together, let us take the first steps towards the creation of the foundations for an era of peace, so that the next generations may live better lives than we do. Yes, Naruto smiled at her. Now, considering how we have gone through the boring parts of explaining the history behind the Jubi, our history of warfare, and stating my goals and ideals, he slightly glanced at Ajisai, whose expression remained unchanged even if he felt the minute changes in the flow of her chakra. He doubted that anyone in this room would have noticed, as there was no living human able to sense chakra the way he did. Deep down Naruto felt just as anxious as her. They had gone past the introductions, explained the background, and stated his goals. Now it was up to them. Would they choose cooperation? Would he have to force them to cooperate? Or would he have to dismantle the shinobi system in its entirety? He felt as if his innards were made out of ice, but after a short nod from Ajisai he knew he couldn't postpone this any longer. The support of her love, as well as Kurama's wisdom, gave him the courage to continue on. To put aside the fear he felt. Because losing the momentum he had built up now would be just as disastrous as showing weakness, and Uzumaki Naruto would have rather died than allowed his own fears and hesitations to destroy the ideals he had. He deliberately left a short silence for the gathered shinobi to process his words, while he took a moment to get a hold of himself. Shall we now commence by establishing a new set of laws? Chapter 28, Epilogue. You who seek peace, do you understand the word? How would you define the concept of peace? Would you presume that an absolute peace could exist? If yes, answer me this: does the taller tree live in peace with the smaller ones that grow around it? No. It puts them in the shadow, while its roots dig deeper and drink with greater thirst. The world at large is filled with a never-ending competition for resources that will always be limited. Mankind is no different from any other animal or plant. Every form of life competes for the right to exist. Peace, the utopia in which there is no conflict, remains an impossibility, an illusion, simply because humans always desire. It is wishful thinking, a fantasy. But reality shows us that in order to feed, to reproduce, to protect like any other animal, the human feeds on the energy it takes from other life forms. And yet there is no other species that is capable of such excessive cruelty as ours. In our unnatural desire for peace, we commit acts which go against any reason or necessity. Our striving for peace leads to violence, as one always comes to the point where the other stands in the way of their idea of peace. Opposing views on how the peaceful world should be have always led to wars, all because we refuse to accept our own natures, all due to our own ignorance. We continued this unending cycle of hatred where one act of violence gave birth to the next. The irony of this cycle is that the desire for peace did not slow the cycle, but instead kept it flowing. Peace only came to be when groups gathered and prepared for the next act of violence. It was merely temporary, because the hunger always continued. Our children need to be fed, our houses need to be paid, our cattle need to roam, all in the image of how we think we had to act. Our view on what is ours, what our rights are, our duty, our beliefs, this is the social construction we call reality. The perception of the individual is always limited. Looking only at our own needs, or those of the people closest to us, eventually always leads to a sense of animosity, as there is always someone else who competes for the same things. Two men desiring the same woman, two farmers desiring the same fertile ground, two merchants desiring the same supplies, two countries claiming the same territory. There will always be conflict. That does not imply that conflict is wrong. No, conflict is part of life, and there will be no growth without conflict. The muscle will only grow stronger when repeatedly pushed to its limits. The mind will not expand if not challenged with new questions. Without conflict, only a world of decay would remain. It would create a dead world, devoid of desires or dreams, where people would not need to feed or have to compete for any resource. It is why the longing for absolute peace creates a tension that inevitably leads to the next violent outburst. Of course, a greater supply of resources would allow for a period where conflict wasn't needed, but eventually mankind would, as any other species, reproduce to the point where its population once again reached a limit. We need to accept that resources are always finite, just as the world has a limited amount of surface, sustaining only a limited amount of life. Eventually the number of humans would grow to a point where competition would once again become prevalent, until it reached a point where the competition once again leads to conflict. This is the exact same thing as what the trees around you do. If there would be more water, there would be more trees to drink it. But the amount of water that irrigates the grounds would place a certain limit on how many trees could exist from it. Increasing the amount of water would give the chance for more trees to drink, whereas a decrease would increase the competition to the point where only the strongest survived or the luckiest. Is that any reason to despair? No. No man or woman should despair at the face of reality. Accepting reality and learning the lessons it teaches might be difficult, yet it forms the only viable path to progress. Though, one should never be deluded in the belief that one can fully comprehend reality. Accepting reality by itself is already difficult enough to do. For that to happen, one first needs to challenge it just like the child challenges the parent in order to explore his or her place in this world. After all, if our perception is limited, how could we ever hope to gain wisdom by merely accepting what we see, without any critical thought? No, we need a change. Our world, our kind, has seen wars for too long. Each conflict only increased the hatred and sorrow. Should we have accepted that? My wife and I could have ignored the world and left it the way it was, retreated ourselves from the cycle of hatred and left mankind to its fate, while we enjoyed our lives in peace. Such selfish things. We have power beyond any other, and as such we felt like we also carried the responsibility for making a choice only we could make, as none were foolish enough to challenge either of us, knowing the power we possessed. We grew up in a world filled with pain and sadness, and while it made us strong, we also wished for no other to experience the same life. At first, the mightiest of our species desired peace, only to end in failure after failure. Our predecessors have explored several paths to make the world a more peaceful place, and failed. We learned from those failures. We realized how unnatural the desire for absolute peace was. Yet, at the same time, war is an affront to nature just as well. Conflict is inevitable, yet our hatred escalated to the point where we aimed for the complete extermination of our enemies. No other species knows such cruelty. So, we offer you our wisdom. We gather those who can guide you. We cannot bring peace, yet we can impose restrictions on the conflicts in the world. To weed out the excesses of our cruelty, we need your help. To carry on our legacy, we founded this school. To sustain the peace, you, the future sages of this world, we offer you this record of our past. The keys to the truth. We can tell you about the past, about the Shinju, Kaguya, Zetsu, the Rikudo Sennin, about all these figures of myth and legend that have all dabbled with powers beyond their comprehension. No matter how vast their might became, they failed to understand how insignificant they still remained. They failed to comprehend their limitations. Nature itself is beyond the comprehension of any individual. The world is too vast for a singular being to understand it. And our planet is just one of many. In truth, we are merely humble parts of the endless renewal of energy, the cycle of life and death, a temporal form of solidified energy, nothing more. But to you, our dear students, we offer this key to a door to a greater view. Use it to reach out to nature, so that you may learn from it, and transcend the barbaric origins of our kind. Use it to evolve beyond what we are, learn from the past, gain true awareness of the present, so that you may give birth to a better future. I'm impressed. Ajisai smiled with barely contained pride. It seems I married not just the world's strongest shinobi, but also a philosopher, she teased. A woman as beautiful and wise as you deserves nothing but the best, he grinned cheekily. Though I expect that I'll be rewriting it many times before I'm truly satisfied with the text. Naruto had given her the scroll that he had been working on for a while. It was the first of several scrolls, this one being the introductory material, but other ones detailing the information they had on Kaguya, the Rikudo Sennin, the accounts of the history of mankind, and much more. There was even one on what little they knew about the Otsutsuki clan, although that one was not supposed to be shared with more than a handful of people. And you are still working on the scrolls that contain the training program that you and Kurama developed along with the toads? Skill in senjutsu seems to be a minimal requirement, yes, but that is hard to put it into words, Naruto nodded. Senjutsu isn't easily understood. Still, there has to be a way in which to offer them a way to see the world as we do. Your Rinnegan cannot be passed on, not after how we brought the Gedo Mazo back to the moon, but I have good hopes that my power can be taught, especially now that the toads have finally agreed to play their part in our little school. Gamamaru finally sent word? Ajisai raised a brow. Well, after nearly 10 years. Yeah, Naruto sighed. That old geezer really should try to keep focused on things. Oh well, we already had Fukasaku and Shima who regularly help us. It was hard to imagine that almost 10 years had passed since the last open war. 10 years ago, the world had been at the brink of destruction. They had only narrowly prevented Otsutsuki Kaguya from rising again. Since that day, they had worked tirelessly. Ajisai had learned to wield the Rinnegan as proficiently as Nagato had before her, and because her body was more attuned to the legendary dojutsu, she was perhaps even better than her predecessor. Naruto, the wielder of the Mokuton Kekkei Genkai, the one who mastered senjutsu, had led the 9 Biju after he had liberated them. Together, they had guided, and at times forced, the shinobi villages to accept a new reality, that wars and conflicts were now settled through diplomacy. Since that day, none of the hidden villages had openly borne arms against the others. Sure, there were disputes more than Naruto and Ajisai wished to count, but none had evolved into the large-scale conflicts of the past. Then again, none of the villages were able to defy the Uzumaki couple, especially after the Shinju, the god tree, had stolen chakra from every living shinobi. The collective power of the hidden villages had diminished permanently. Their power had decreased even more due to the fact that there were no longer any Jinchuriki. The 9 creatures now were free, though they were still, to some extent, attached to Naruto. With Ajisai's help, even Kurama was now able to roam the outside world freely, though he left a considerable chunk of his chakra in Naruto's seal. He, as well as the other Biju, had no desire to kill the person who had liberated them. Even Chomei, who arguably had the greatest grudge against the Uzumaki due to the death of Fu, agreed to, and put his trust in, the plans forged by the last Jinchuriki and Kurama. Granted, in spite of their newfound freedom, the 9 were still cautious, and preferred to stick close. Though close was a relative concept, considering how this area spanned both the former nation of Takigakure, parts of Odogakure, and the desolate wilderness around the Sangaku no Hakaba, mountain's graveyard, that lay in between. The area was vast enough for the nine to be able to live quietly. That meant that they could keep their distances from each other. Shikaku, for instance, could not stand Kurama. Likewise, Chomei and Isabu had such conflicting personalities that they usually ended up squabbling just as much as the fox and the tanuki squabbles that tended to lead to the destruction of many acres of land at a time. Siblings. Naruto shook his head as he thought about the rambunctious nine. Then, thinking of disorderly children, Aji-chan, where did Jiraiya-chan run off to? After reading through the scrolls that Naruto had compiled, she had returned to her own hobby. Ajisai usually spent a significant portion of her limited spare time on improving her skill in drawing and painting. Naruto had his hobby of redecorating landscapes and spawning new buildings, and she had her drawings and paintings. Jiraiya-chan, Naruto repeated himself, idly wiping a spot of red paint from his wife's cheek. Oh, he's playing with Chomei again. Ajisai smiled happily. Usually parents would be more concerned when their 4-year-old son went on his little expedition, but well, they weren't exactly normal people. Chomei, for some reason the being refused to explain, had taken a liking to their little purple-haired ball of energy. While extremely carefree in his regular behavior, Chomei was very protective of little Jiraiya. Overprotective, one might even say. Butterfly-chan, as the boy called the enormous creature, once even used a baijidama when a swarm of wasps had come too close to the child. Overkill had not even come close to being the right word to describe that situation. Still, little Jiraiya had loved the pretty fireworks and Naruto had loved the chance at designing a new forest from the crater. Alas, Ajisai had been less amused by Komiai's actions. She, and every sane mother with her, didn't think it was a good idea for the tailed beast to throw around landscape-altering baijidama when a 3-year-old stood right next to it. Hence the reason why they trusted Chomei with their son's safety. Chomei knew better than to risk the Rinnegan bearer's wrath ever again. Shouldn't you use a darker shade of purple for Jiraiya-chan's hair? Naruto laid his chin on Ajisai's shoulder, looking at the portrait she made of her son. It's not finished yet. The orange-haired woman swatted Naruto with her paintbrush, giving her husband a purple nose, albeit still a lighter shade of purple than their son's hair. She giggled when he got back at her by wiping off his painted nose at her cheek. Shouldn't you be going out now, eh? Ajisai nodded at the calendar. Oh, right. I was wondering why it had gotten so busy in the past hour. He absent-mindedly rubbed his nose, what only caused the paint to spread further. I thought it would be another problem that had to be settled, never knew it was already this time of year. 4 times a year, and still you managed to forget about it, the orange-haired woman sighed. Kurama is right, you are a scatterbrain. Ah, not you too, Naruto whined. What did I do wrong to deserve such a harsh treatment? Blame it on the hormones, she smirked. And you're to blame for that. Hey, it's not like you didn't enjoy every second of it, he smirked, gently rubbing over the bloated belly of his pregnant wife. You're still planning on asking Konan? Well, she did seem to be a bit jealous of Tsunade when we asked her to be Jiraiya-chan's godmother, even if she'd never say such a thing out loud, so yes. Ino and Swearin are both going to blow a fuse once they find out that we're having a girl. He shook his head, already wondering why he was so much more concerned than he was when Ajisai was pregnant with the baby they had named in honor of the man who had, in their opinion, truly rescued the world. The Toad Sage's spirit had been liberated from the belly of the Shinigami, and they had vowed that his sacrifice would never be forgotten. In fact, next to the accounts written by historians, daimyo, kage, or the various temples spread through the nations, Naruto had made the story of Jiraiya's life part of the study material for their yet-to-be-opened academy for Senjutsu. The tale of Jiraiya the Gallant would live on, and show the future generations how much a noble heart could change the world. Of course, Jiraiya would also long be remembered for another franchise of novels that remained as popular as it had ever been. They probably will, but you can worry about that at a later time. If you don't leave now you'll be late for your meeting, so shoo, Ajisai grinned, jokingly making hand gestures to chase her husband away. Her other hand was gently rested on her belly, atop of the girl whom she wished to carry her long-lost sister's name. And then the mean stingies went all boom. A little boy with unruly and spiky purple hair told his story, with an enthusiasm that brought a smile to the face of the godmother who held the 4-year-old in her arms. Ka-chan was a bit angry at Butterfly-chan for using a damsel, though. Really now, so he used a damsel? Tsunade raised a single brow, her brown eyes shifting to gaze at the compressed fur of the 7-tailed Biju. She knew very well what the boy meant, a dama baijidama. I might have gone overboard a little, the bug-like creature admitted awkwardly. While little Jiraiya was happily oblivious to it, Chomei felt the full brunt of Tsunade's deadly glare. Ajisai-sama already admonished me for it, in fact. I'm sure she did, Konan chimed in with her usual dry tone of voice, though she was visibly amused by the quiver in the Biju's voice. Apparently the young woman had made a firm impression on the usually happy-go-lucky creature. If you don't mind me asking, Tsunade-sama, why are you at this meeting? Kuratsuchi, the Tsuchikage of Iwagakure no Sato asked hesitantly. Escorting the Hokage, of course. Tsunade had her eyes glued on her godson again, but answered the question nonetheless. Also, I'm moving over to this place now that Asuma is completely adjusted to his new job. I was adjusted to my job 3 years ago, the Rokudame Hokage muttered indignantly. The Godame just kept treating him like a kid, even if he had passed the age of 40 and had 2 kids with Kurenai. Bachan is going to live with us? Before Tsunade could respond to Asuma's grumbling, a certain starry-eyed boy demanded her full attention. Really, Arie. I think she's clear enough, Jiraiya-chan. 2-chan. Slippery like an eel, the 4-year-old boy got out of Tsunade's grip and jumped into his father's open arms. Naruto, who had just risen from the ground like it was a completely ordinary thing to do, just laughed as he caught the enthusiastic child, ignoring the slightly pouting Tsunade. Tenten, who had gone along in order to guard her Hokage, giggled. So, did you and Chome blow up something today? Nuh, the purple-haired kid smiled mischievously. We only teased Yuki-san a little. Not with the cattle prod again, I hope? Naruto felt a few drops of cold sweat in his neck when he saw his son nod happily. Gyuki, the Hachibi, did not like that particular item. And worse, he blamed Naruto for giving the boy such an instrument of torture even though Naruto had no clue how the boy had gotten his hands on the infernal thing. He had locked away the old scroll that once belonged to his son's namesake, fearing that his son had somehow gotten that prod out of it, and he certainly did not want his son to accidentally stumble upon the stash of porn the old perv had gathered. Unfortunately for Naruto, little Jiraiya nodded happily. Oh well, I guess that means he'll be sulking for the next few months. Again. I thought we told you not to do that, Jiraiya-chan. I forgot? You are not a very convincing liar. Naruto ruffled through his son's hair. Chome, why don't you and Jiraiya-chan go seek out Koko? Koko's one of the few who can convince Gyuki to stop sulking. Ajisai-sama or yourself could talk to him as well, Chome proposed, knowing full well that Naruto wouldn't involve his wife in this. She, too, blamed Naruto for the cattle prod. No can do, Naruto nodded at the assembled shinobi, who looked at the exchange with badly hidden glee. None doubted Naruto's power, yet there were a happy few who truly knew the man. And these people regularly met him. They knew that his son could literally get away with everything. All the child needed were his big innocent eyes and a slight pout, and Naruto lost. But 2-chan, nope, Naruto put down his son, and gave him a gentle nudge. Go play outside, K? HMPF, fine, little Jiraiya grumped. No one fell for the act though. In fact, the boy dropped the sad act even before he reached the doors, and happily skipped away with the small form of Chome in tow. The brat is just as foolish as you were, Komiai's brother chuckled with his deep voice. Just like his brethren, Kurama had gained the ability to compress his chakra and control the size of his body. How Ajisai had managed to do it was something not even the Biju themselves knew, but the fact remained that she changed an aspect of their chakra, and that this change enabled the 9 to change the sizes of their bodies. Well, Shikaku had been a unique case in this contrast, as Ajisai didn't need to change anything about his body. She merely needed to threaten him so that he used less sand to create his own body. Why? Well, Ajisai and Naruto had both been rather displeased that the one-tailed Biju had trashed their flower garden, so Naruto couldn't say that Shikaku didn't deserve that scolding. Naruto suspected that Shikaku had shrunken down out of pure fear for his wife. In an odd way, and in spite of the huge difference in age, Naruto and Ajisai somewhat functioned as the parents of the Biju. I suppose it would be hard to deny that I once acted like a 4-year-old, Naruto grinned. But thankfully I grew up into the amazing shinobi you see today, TSK, big-mouthed fool, Kurama muttered. These years of peace have made you airhead again. I thought that you were happy about the lack of war, Kurama-san. The Mizukage, Meitarumi smiled. Me and my brethren are as much a cause of that peace as the bipedal is, the man-sized fox huffed. But let's start with the meeting. That Tinkin from Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron, is here too, so everyone's ready. As you command, O furry one, Naruto gave a mock salute. He chuckled when the fox fumed, before switching to a more serious expression. So, how are the Hyuga doing, Hokage Dano? Unhappy, Asuma smirked. But the entire caged bird system has been dismantled without further incident. Although, I think it would have taken a lot more time if you had not intervened. You should thank Ba-chan for that one. She's the one who trained Hanabi-chan and sent her to this village. Those stupid Hyuga elders trying to use the seal in order to force her into a marriage she didn't want, even though she was already living here, was just the excuse I needed to involve myself. They violated your neutrality by assaulting someone that fell under your protection. Temari agreed that his actions had been justified. I bet Niji and Hinata are overjoyed. Hayashi stepped down as soon as the clan's laws changed, and happily made Niji his successor. Hinata still didn't want the position. But I'm sure Shikamaru already told you about that already. Asuma winked at the Kazekage. By that logic, Swayan should have told me about Niji-san, Konan remarked calmly, much to the embarrassment of her guard. Oh great, that's going to be another problem with the Hyuga, Asuma deadpanned. And here I just heard that Hanabi elected to stay here, rather than going home? He turned to look at Naruto. Yes, she has quite the fascination with cats, it seems. She and Matatabi are getting along surprisingly well, Naruto nodded. It was quite surprising, as Matatabi, much like Chomei and Gyuki, had held a strong bond with her Jinchuriki. While Chomei was rather easygoing, Matatabi and Gyuki needed more time to deal with their losses. In fact, Gyuki still only barely tolerated humans, claiming that they reminded him too much of his time with B. So yes, when Matatabi had begrudgingly tolerated the inquisitive young woman, Naruto and the others had been surprised. Perhaps now that the Hyuga thing is solved, I could truly begin teaching Hanabi. Naruto frowned a little at the thought. The younger Hyuga reminded him of her sister Hinata in many ways, but she was more confident and outgoing. Beyond that, she had already shown that she was able to break out of her clan's dogma, so her mind was flexible enough. If he told her what he had in mind, you didn't learn to properly master senjutsu when you were a kid either, Naruto, Kurama chimed in. While he had a manifestation in the outside world, he and Naruto were still linked. Yeah, it's worth a shot. I'll ask Matatabi if she's willing to cooperate later on. Without her, Hanabi would never have the necessary chakra reserves to gather enough natural energy. Don't forget that the toads need to agree as well. Gamamaru might offer some insights, but it'll probably take another decade for him to realize I asked a question. Oh well, I could ask Fukasaku and Shima for their opinions about Hanabi. I already intended to ask them when it would be wise to begin instructing Jiraiya-chan about natural energy. Naruto? Tsunade waved a hand in front of the dazed Uzumaki. Earth to Naruto? Sorry, I kinda drifted off. As I was saying, the Senju said pointedly. I decided to move to your village. While I trust Hanabi's skill as a medic, I want Agisai to have the best doctors available. Why don't you just admit you wanted to be closer to your godson, Tsunade-sama? Omoi, the Godame Reikage chuckled. Or is it that you are on the run from debtors again? I heard that some even hired bounty hunters. Would coming here mean that Konoha can't handle them? Is the balance of powers disrupted? Are we going to have another world war again? Reikage-sama, your imagination is running rampant again. Kuratsuchi shook her head. The lollipop-chewing Reikage was undeniably an intelligent man, but his thoughts were still an odd thing to listen to and usually utterly impossible to follow. Normally, Karui would be around to smack him back to his senses, but for some reason she hadn't been in his guard detail this time. Omoi seemed happier than usual, and Naruto knew that smile all too well. It was the one he had now that Agisai was pregnant. We're happy to have you join our little village, Ba-chan. Jiraiya-chan will be ecstatic, Naruto smiled after clearing his throat. But are you sure Ino and Shizen will agree? PFF, they've got their own lives now. The Busta Senju huffed. Ino is practically in charge of the village whenever Asuma isn't around, bullying around her poor husband, while Shizen runs a tight ship in Konoha's hospital. No, I'm no longer needed there. I'm quite sure neither would agree with that, Tsunade-sama, Tenten frowned. The bandaged blade on the young woman's back squirmed in agreement. See, even Same-chan knows you're lying. Little Jiraiya has done what his namesake could never do, the sword-wielder quipped. She's always welcome, Naruto chuckled. I'm still not going to let you set up your own gambling den here though. The small village that Naruto created stood near the remnants of Takigakure, although after the rampage of the Jubi there wasn't much left to recall that former village. Before Naruto or Agisai had been able to come up with a name, the two had heard how their newly found village had been referred to as Yuzushigakure, and they had let that name stick. Not only because Naruto felt like it was a good way to honor his fallen ancestors, but also because it served as a reminder of why this neutral village was created. This village housed the central court where the disputes between nations or villages were settled, where emerging conflicts were solved before they reached the point of unnecessary slaughter, unnecessary slaughter such as the fall of the original Yuzushiogakure no Sato, or the Uchiha massacre, tired of war, crippled by losses, and even further brought down by the chakra that every shinobi lost to the Shinju, the hidden villages had agreed. Not that they were happy, especially the older generations, but they had cooperated and joined Naruto and Ajisai in the creation of a set of laws which were designed to loosely maintain the current status quo. It was no perfect peace, as there were still quite a few conflicts around the world, but it was easily better than how they had used to live. Of course, when these laws had been set in motion, there had been an influx of missing nin who opted for violence rather than peace, but in general it was nothing the hidden villages themselves couldn't handle. Even a feeble attempt to set up a new hidden village had been shot down with ease, and whenever things threatened to get out of hand, Naruto and Ajisai were easily capable of crushing whatever threat there was. This was how Naruto hoped that his future Senjutsu students, the future generations of sages, would maintain the peace. The Biju had all the might necessary, but they would easily lose the fragile connection to mankind. Their centuries of experience, and their completely different physiology meant that they often had trouble understanding the issues of the short-living humans. The sages would mediate between the Biju and mankind, just as much as they would mediate between the many factions and nations of humans. Those who listened to the voice of nature would come to play a vital role, and Naruto hoped that Hanabi and little Jiraiya would be the first students to prove that point, and he had yet to start searching for promising students in the other nations. It has been 2 years since the last incident. One might almost grow complacent, Mei said jokingly. It seems that my generation, the one that fought wars and civil wars, that has witnessed and committed atrocities of many kinds, should take a step back. It is no secret to any of you that I have been grooming my successor for several years now. And now it feels like the right time to make Chojuro the Rokudai Mizukichi. Why are you putting this forward in this meeting? Temari raised a single eyebrow, surprised that the most experienced Kaguya amongst them would step down. The laws we established stated that we each may appoint our own leaders. I am aware that it is, technically, an internal matter, Kazekage-sama, but still I felt like it was the proper thing to do, Mei smiled. Is there any amongst you who would oppose Chojuro's appointment? None spoke up, so Naruto spoke up. It seems none of us disagree. I honestly had not expected that anyone would, I admit. Chojuro's strength already made him a suitable candidate, and his calm personality only makes him more suited to take a leading role in the peaceful world we envision. Yes, the future generations of sages would play a pivotal role in the world, but so did the leaders of the hidden villages and the various daimyo. Everything would go so much smoother if they, or at least the majority of them, cooperated. He smiled as he saw his wife talk with an uncharacteristically bashful Konan. By the looks of it, the leader of Amigakure had not expected to be asked to become the godmother of the yet-to-be-born daughter of Ajisai and Naruto. The woman was so taken aback that Suiren and Tenten began teasing her. Sitting atop the head of the Juchiman Kannon, Naruto momentarily closed his eyes and extended his senses. The Kannon always had an inexplicable affinity for suffering, one that Naruto had first thought to have stemmed from Kurama's chakra. Kurama had denied that, although even the fox was uncertain. The two of them had eventually come to the hypothesis, even if it was impossible to properly test said hypothesis, that the Juchiman Kannon, just as Hashirama's Senju Kannon, had somehow had its origins in the natural energy that had to be used to form the statue. From his elevated position, he could look down upon the village he and Ajisai had created. It was peaceful and quiet, inhabited by around 100 souls, but more importantly, it was home. After everything they had gone through, this oasis of peace was everything they could ever wish for. It was a perfect place to raise their children, as well as a perfect place to establish their academy. Plus, he could live here without the stupendous amounts of paperwork he would have had if he had become a Kage. He didn't even have a daimyo to whom he needed to answer. A loud yawn resounded. Next to the massive wooden statue lay the uncompressed form of the infamous Kyubi no Yoko. When he didn't need to be inside buildings, Kurama generally preferred to be his gigantic self. This was actually fine with Naruto and Ajisai, considering how the lazy Biju slept most of the time, causing far less havoc than his brethren. Kurama, the being who was able to sense negative emotions, and Naruto, standing atop a statue that heard the voices of the suffering, they made an unusual combination. However, the true peculiarity was the fact that they both could extend their senses and feel at ease. Sure, the murmur of suffering and hatred remained, and would likely always continue, but the world had grown far more silent to their senses. There were countless reasons for suffering, after all. From common illness to heartache, from a child with a hurt knee to the victims of war, there were more causes than Naruto could bother to think about. Still, The fact that the world had grown a bit more silent made him proud to the point that he reveled in this relative silence for a prolonged time. One eye cracked open, and Kurama moved his arm to budge the wooden statue at his side. While the force behind the nudge could easily have taken down a regular building, it did little more than shake up the cannon a little. It was enough for Naruto to pay attention to his surroundings. I see, it must be time, Naruto smiled. Not even moving a single finger, Naruto mentally ordered the Jutsuman cannon to sink back into the ground. Just in time to catch the little messenger in his arms. To-chan, Jiraiya whined, the boy's blue eyes sparkling. Ba-chan is going to live door next. It is pronounced next door, Jiraiya-chan, the blonde chuckled. And yes, Ba-chan is going to stay with us. And Ka-chan has footsies. You're not even trying to say it right, are you? But Butterfly-chan said it's called footsies. The boy tilted his head slightly. And I am hungry. Then we shouldn't let Ka-chan waiting, should we? Ramen! The war cry of the two ramen-addicted Uzumaki made Kurama grimace. Why couldn't they just let him sleep? Naruto teasingly flipped him off. The world was perfect, his life was perfect, and no lazy fox was going to tell him otherwise.